Hey everyone, I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know a lot of you use this video to fall asleep, so before we start, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you from and what time is it there? Now get comfortable, take a deep breath, and just relax. The man in the basement. David and his wife Sarah lived in a nice suburban home with their 8-year-old son Tyler. They'd moved into the house just 6 months ago, and everything seemed perfect. Tyler had adjusted well to the new school, made friends quickly, and seemed happier than ever. One Saturday morning, David found Tyler at the kitchen table, working intently on a drawing. Tyler usually drew dinosaurs or superheroes, so David was surprised to see him drawing what looked like their house. But something was off about the picture. "Hey buddy, what are you drawing?" David asked, sitting down next to his son. "Our house," Tyler said without looking up. He was coloring in the windows with a black crayon. David looked closer at the drawing. Tyler had drawn their 2-story house pretty accurately, with the red door and the big oak tree in the front yard. But underneath the house, Tyler had drawn another room. A room that didn't exist. "What's this room down here?" David asked, pointing to the space Tyler had drawn beneath the house. "That's where the man lives," Tyler said casually, switching to a brown crayon. David felt a chill run down his spine. "What man?" "The man who watches us sleep." David tried to keep his voice steady. "Tyler, there's no room under our house. We don't have a basement, remember?" Tyler finally looked up at his father. "Yes, we do. The man showed me. He said it's been there for a long time. Since before we moved in." That night, David told Sarah about the drawing. She laughed it off at first, saying Tyler probably just had an active imagination. But David couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. He'd been in the crawl space under the house when they'd first moved in. There was definitely no basement. Over the next few days, Tyler drew more pictures. Each one showed the same thing. Their house with a room underneath. And in that room, Tyler always drew the same figure. A tall man with no face just standing there. "Tyler, when did this man show you the basement?" Sarah asked one evening at dinner. "When you and Daddy are sleeping," Tyler said, pushing his peas around his plate. "He comes to my room and takes me down there. He says he's lonely." David and Sarah exchanged worried looks. That night, they made Tyler sleep in their room. They locked all the doors and windows. David even checked the crawl space again with a flashlight. Nothing but dirt and pipes. But at 3 a.m., they woke up to find Tyler's sleeping bag empty. They searched the house frantically, calling Tyler's name. They found him in the kitchen, standing by the pantry door. He was just staring at it. "Tyler, you scared us," Sarah said, rushing to him. "What are you doing?" "He wants me to come down," Tyler said in a flat voice. "He's waiting." David opened the pantry door. It was just their normal pantry. Canned goods, cereal boxes, nothing unusual. But Tyler kept insisting that's where the door to the basement was. The next day, David decided to do some research on their house. What he found made his blood run cold. The house had been built in 1952 by a man named William Crane. Crane had disappeared in 1961, and the house had changed hands several times since then. But there was one detail that stood out. In the original blueprints, there was supposed to be a basement, but it was never built, or at least that's what the records showed. David hired a contractor to come look at the house. The contractor used special equipment to scan beneath the foundation. What he found didn't make sense. "There's definitely a hollow space down there," the contractor said, looking at his equipment. "But there's no access point. It's like someone sealed it off completely, filled in whatever entrance there was." That night, Tyler drew another picture. This time, he drew the man in more detail. The man was wearing old-fashioned clothes. A suit and tie from what looked like the 1960s. And in the corner of the drawing, Tyler had written something that made David's hands shake. "William says you found out about him. He's not happy." David and Sarah packed up that night. They took Tyler and went to stay with Sarah's parents. They put the house up for sale the next week. But before they left, David found one more drawing under Tyler's bed. It showed their family driving away in their car. And in the rearview mirror, standing in the doorway of their house, was the tall man with no face, waving goodbye. "The house is still for sale." The friend from the woods. Rebecca was a single mother raising her 6-year-old daughter, Emma. They lived in a small house at the edge of town, where the backyard bordered a thick forest. Rebecca had always told Emma not to go into the woods alone, and Emma had always been good about following that rule. One afternoon, Rebecca was doing laundry when Emma came running inside, her face flushed with excitement. "Mommy, I made a new friend." Rebecca smiled. "That's wonderful, honey. Is it someone from school?" "No, she lives in the woods. Her name is Lily." Rebecca's smile faded. "Emma, you didn't go into the woods, did you?" "No, Mommy." She came to the fence. "She said she's been watching me play and wanted to be friends." Rebecca felt uneasy but tried not to show it. Maybe it was just another child from the neighborhood. "What does Lily look like?" Instead of answering, Emma ran to get her crayons and paper. She sat at the coffee table and started drawing. Rebecca watched as her daughter carefully drew two figures. One was clearly Emma with her blonde pigtails and pink dress. The other figure made Rebecca's heart skip a beat. The other girl, Lily, was drawn with long black hair that covered most of her face. She was wearing what looked like an old-fashioned white nightgown. But the most disturbing part was her feet. Emma had drawn them backwards, with the toes pointing behind her. "Emma, why did you draw her feet like that?" Emma looked up innocently. "That's how they are, Mommy. She walks funny." She said she had an accident a long time ago. That night, Rebecca made sure all the doors and windows were locked. She pulled the curtains closed on the windows facing the woods. But she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. The next day, Emma drew more pictures of Lily. In each one, Lily was getting closer to the house. First by the fence, then in the middle of the yard, then on the back porch. When Rebecca asked Emma if she'd seen Lily again, Emma nodded happily. "She comes every day now. She taught me a new game. We play hide and seek, but I'm not supposed to find her. She says she's really good at hiding because she's been doing it for a long time." Rebecca decided to work from home for the next few days so she could keep an eye on Emma. She watched her daughter play in the backyard, but never saw any other child. Emma, however, continued to talk and play as if someone else was there. She'd throw a ball and wait, then run to get it as if someone had thrown it back. She'd have conversations with empty air, laughing at jokes Rebecca couldn't hear. One evening, Rebecca was making dinner when she heard Emma talking in her room. She crept down the hallway and listened at the door. "I don't know if Mommy will let me," Emma was saying. "She doesn't like me going in the woods." There was a pause as if Emma was listening to someone. "But it's dark in the woods at night. I'm scared of the dark." Another pause. "You'll protect me? Promise?" Rebecca burst into the room. Emma was sitting on her bed, alone. But the window was open, the curtains fluttering in the breeze. "Emma, did you open the window?" Emma shook her head. "Lily did. She doesn't like being inside. She says it reminds her of the box." "What box?" "The box they put her in. Under the ground. She says she didn't like it there. It was dark and cold and she couldn't breathe." Rebecca felt like she was going to be sick. She closed the window and locked it, then sat down next to Emma. "Honey, I need you to tell me more about Lily. Where exactly does she live in the woods?" Emma got her crayons again and drew a picture. This time she drew the woods with scary accuracy. Tall trees, thick bushes, and in the middle, a small clearing. In the clearing, she drew what looked like a wooden cross stuck in the ground. "She lives here," Emma said, pointing to the cross. "She says it's her special place. She's been waiting there for someone to play with for a really, really long time." That night, Rebecca called the police. She told them about Emma's imaginary friend and the drawing of the clearing with the cross. The officer sounded skeptical but said they'd send someone to check the woods in the morning. But that night, Rebecca woke up to find Emma's bed empty. The window was open again despite being locked. Rebecca ran outside, screaming Emma's name. She could see small footprints in the mud, leading toward the woods. But there was another set of footprints too. Footprints that faced the wrong direction. Rebecca ran into the woods, following the trail. She found Emma in a small clearing, exactly like the one in her drawing. Emma was sitting on the ground, talking to the air. And there, sticking out of the earth, was an old wooden cross. The paint was faded, but Rebecca could just make out a name. Lily Morrison, 1955 to 1961. Rebecca grabbed Emma and ran back to the house. They left that night and never returned. But Emma kept drawing pictures of Lily for months afterward. In the last picture she drew, Lily wasn't alone. She was holding hands with another little girl. A girl with blonde pigtails and a pink dress. Rebecca burned that picture. The Shadow family. Mark was proud of his 7-year-old son Jake. The boy was smart, creative, and had recently started showing real talent for art. Their refrigerator was covered with Jake's drawings, mostly pictures of their family doing normal things. Going to the park, eating pizza, watching movies together. But one Thursday evening, Mark found a drawing that was different from the others. Jake had left it on the dining room table, and at first glance, it looked like another family portrait. There was Mark, his wife Linda, Jake, and his little sister Sophie. But behind each family member, Jake had drawn dark shadows. And these shadows had faces. "Hey Jake," Mark called out. "Can you come here for a second?" Jake bounced into the room, still in his dinosaur pajamas. "Yeah, Dad? This is a really interesting drawing. Can you tell me about it?" Jake climbed onto Mark's lap and looked at the picture. "That's us. And that's our shadow family." "Shadow family?" "Yeah, they follow us everywhere. They look just like us, but they're all black and they live in the shadows. They told me they've been with us forever." Mark felt a strange unease creep over him. "When did they tell you this?" "They don't talk with their mouths. They talk in my head. They're actually really nice. They said they protect us." Linda thought it was just Jake's imagination running wild. Kids had imaginary friends all the time. But Mark noticed that Jake had started drawing these shadow figures in every picture. Always standing behind the family, always with those strange faces that looked almost like theirs but not quite right. One night, Mark woke up to use the bathroom. As he walked down the hallway, he saw Jake's door was open. He peeked inside and saw Jake sitting up in bed, staring at the corner of his room. "Jake, what are you doing awake, buddy?" Jake didn't look at him. "Shadow Daddy is telling me a story." Mark flicked on the light. The corner was empty. "There's nobody there, Jake. He doesn't like the light. He went back into the shadow. But he's still there. He's always there." Over the next few weeks, Jake's drawings became more detailed. The shadow family started appearing in front of the real family instead of behind them. Their faces became clearer, and Mark realized with growing horror that they looked exactly like his family, just rendered in blacks and grays. Then Sophie, who was only 4, started talking about the shadow family too. "Shadow mommy plays with me when real mommy is busy," she said one day at breakfast. Linda and Mark exchanged worried glances. They hadn't told Sophie about Jake's drawings or his imaginary shadow family. That weekend, Mark decided to set up a camera in Jake's room to see if he could figure out what was causing these nighttime conversations. What he saw on the footage the next morning made him call in sick to work. At 2:47 a.m., Jake sat up in bed. He started talking just like Mark had witnessed before. But on the camera, using night vision mode, Mark could see something else. The shadows in Jake's room were wrong. They didn't match the furniture or Jake's position. And they were moving, independently of anything in the room. Mark showed the footage to Linda. She tried to rationalize it, saying it must be a trick of the light or something wrong with the camera. But then Sophie drew a picture that changed everything. Sophie, who could barely draw stick figures, had somehow drawn a detailed picture of their living room. But in her picture, there were 2 of each family member. The regular family was sitting on the couch. The shadow family was sitting on a shadow couch directly beneath them, like a mirror image. And at the bottom of the picture, in shaky 4-year-old handwriting, Sophie had written, "They want to trade places." That night at dinner, Mark tried to get more information. "Jake, what else do the shadow people tell you?" Jake looked uncomfortable. "They said I'm not supposed to tell you everything." "Why not?" "Because you won't let them do it if you know." "Do what?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "They're tired of being shadows. They want to be real. And they said we could be shadows instead. They said it's not bad. It's just different. We could watch and protect other families like they protect us." Linda dropped her fork. "Jake, honey, did they say when they want to do this?" Jake nodded. "Tonight. When the moon is gone. They said it won't hurt. We'll just go to sleep and wake up different." Mark and Linda didn't wait. They packed up the kids and went to a hotel. But as they were driving away, Sophie pointed at the car windows. "Look, the shadow family is following us." Mark looked in the rearview mirror. The streetlights were casting shadows of their car on the road behind them. But the shadows were wrong. There were too many. And they were moving differently than their car was moving. They stayed in the hotel for 3 days. Jake and Sophie stopped talking about the shadow family. They stopped drawing them. Everything seemed to go back to normal. But when they finally returned home, they found something that made them put the house up for sale immediately. On every mirror in the house, someone had drawn figures in what looked like black crayon. 4 shadow figures. A family. And underneath, in Jake's handwriting, were the words, "We're still waiting." They moved across the country. Started fresh. But sometimes, when the light hits just right, Mark swears he can see too many shadows. And sometimes, late at night, he hears Jake whispering to the corner of his room. The calendar girl. Michael and Patricia were worried about their 9-year-old daughter, Ella. She'd always been a quiet child, but lately she'd become even more withdrawn. She spent hours in her room drawing, only coming out for meals. Her teacher said she was doing fine at school, but at home, something was clearly wrong. One evening, Patricia decided to check on what Ella had been drawing. What she found made her call Michael immediately. Ella had drawn calendar pages. Dozens of them. Each page showed a different month, and on specific dates, Ella had drawn pictures of things that hadn't happened yet. On a date 3 days in the future, Ella had drawn a picture of their neighbor's house with an ambulance in front of it. On a date 2 weeks away, she'd drawn their car with a flat tire on the side of the highway. On a date 1 month away, she'd drawn Patricia in bed with thermometer in her mouth and medicine bottles on the nightstand. But the most disturbing drawing was on a date 6 months in the future. Ella had drawn herself, but she looked different. Older. And she was standing next to someone Patricia didn't recognize. A woman with long red hair and a strange smile. Under this drawing, Ella had written, "The day I leave with Miss Catherine." Michael and Patricia sat down with Ella that night. "Sweetheart, can you tell us about these calendar drawings?" Ella looked at them with tired eyes. "She shows me things. Things that are going to happen." "Who shows you?" "Miss Catherine. She says I'm special. I can see what she sees. She's been teaching me." "Where did you meet Miss Catherine?" Patricia asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "I didn't meet her. She's always been there. But I only started seeing her this year. She says I'm old enough now. She says she's been waiting for me to be ready." Michael pulled out the drawing of Ella with Miss Catherine. "What does this mean? The day you leave with her?" Ella's face went pale. "I'm not supposed to tell you about that. She said you wouldn't understand. She said you'd try to stop it." Over the next few days, Patricia and Michael watched Ella carefully. She continued to draw her calendar pages, adding more and more events. Some were small things. Rain on specific days. A bird hitting their window. A package arriving. And disturbingly, they started coming true. 3 days after they'd found the drawings, an ambulance did arrive at their neighbor's house. Mr. Peterson had had a heart attack. 2 weeks later, they got a flat tire on the highway, exactly where Ella had drawn it. They took Ella to see a therapist, but Ella refused to talk about Miss Catherine with anyone except her parents. The therapist suggested it might be a form of anxiety, that Ella was trying to control her environment by predicting things. But that didn't explain how her predictions kept coming true. One night, Patricia woke up to find Ella standing at the foot of their bed, just staring at them. "Ella? What's wrong, honey?" "Miss Catherine wants to meet you. She says you need to understand." Before Patricia could respond, Ella turned and walked out of the room. Patricia and Michael followed her down to the living room, where Ella sat on the couch and picked up her drawing pad. "She's here," Ella said. "She wants me to draw her so you can see." Ella drew faster than Patricia had ever seen her draw before. Her hand moved across the paper in quick, sure strokes. When she was done, she turned the pad around. The drawing showed their living room exactly as it was. But standing next to the TV was a woman. She had long red hair and was wearing an old-fashioned dress. Her smile was too wide, and her eyes seemed to follow them even though it was just a drawing. "She says she's been waiting for me for a long time," Ella said in a monotone voice. "She says I'm like her. I can see things. And when I'm older, I can help her find other children who can see things too." Patricia grabbed the drawing pad. "Ella, this needs to stop. Miss Catherine isn't real." Ella looked at her mother with an expression Patricia had never seen before. It was cold, almost pitying. "She's more real than you know. She showed me what happens to families who try to stop her. Do you want me to draw that too?" Michael stepped forward. "Is that a threat?" Ella's face suddenly crumpled and she started crying. "I don't want to see any more. But she won't leave me alone. She shows me terrible things when I close my eyes. She says if I don't go with her, she'll make them happen to you." They tried everything. They moved Ella to a different room. They got rid of all her drawing supplies. They even had a priest come to bless the house. But Ella continued to have visions. She would describe them in detail and they kept coming true. The breaking point came when Ella drew a picture dated 1 week in the future. It showed Michael in a hospital bed, machines all around him. His eyes were closed. "No," Patricia said firmly. "This one won't come true. We won't let it." They kept Michael home from work. They didn't let him drive anywhere. They watched him constantly. But 6 days later, Michael collapsed in the kitchen. A brain aneurysm, the doctors said. Something that had probably been building for years. He survived, but only barely. When he woke up in the hospital, exactly as Ella had drawn, the first thing he said was, "We need to find Miss Catherine." They hired a private investigator to research the name. What he found chilled them to the bone. Catherine Morrison had been a woman who lived in their town in the 1970s. She'd claimed to be psychic, said she could see the future. She'd worked with several families, teaching their children to develop their gifts. But in 1979, she'd disappeared, along with 6 children from different families. None of them were ever found. The investigator found one more disturbing detail. In old newspaper photos of Catherine Morrison, she looked exactly like the woman Ella had drawn. The same red hair, the same too wide smile, the same old-fashioned dress. Ella's 6-month deadline was approaching. She'd stopped eating, stopped sleeping. She just sat by her window, staring out at nothing. Sometimes Patricia would hear her whispering, "I understand. I'll be ready." With 1 month left, they made a desperate decision. They had Ella admitted to a psychiatric facility that specialized in children with severe dissociative disorders. The doctors said it was for the best, that Ella needed professional help. But on the morning of the day Ella had marked in her calendar, the hospital called. Ella was gone. Her room was locked from the inside, the windows were sealed, but she was gone. The only thing left was a drawing on the wall, done in crayon. It showed Ella walking hand in hand with a woman with long red hair. They were walking toward a group of other children, all of them smiling. At the bottom, in Ella's handwriting, were the words, "Don't try to find me. She keeps her promises." The police searched for months. They found no trace of Ella. But other families started coming forward. Families whose children had drawn similar pictures. Families whose children had mentioned a Miss Catherine. The drawings are kept in evidence now. Dozens of them from different children across the state. All showing the same woman. All showing the same too wide smile. And all of them dated 6 months before each child disappeared. The collection. I've been collecting these stories for 3 years now. Parents send them to me, sometimes with the drawings attached, sometimes just with descriptions. They send them because they need someone to believe them. They need someone to understand that their children didn't just have wild imaginations. But last week something changed. My own daughter Lucy came to me with a drawing. She's only 5, just learning to hold a crayon properly. But she'd drawn our house. And standing in front of it were 4 children. Children I recognized from the photos their parents had sent me. Emma with her pigtails. Jake with his dinosaur shirt. Sophie with her little pink shoes. And Ella with her tired eyes. Under the drawing, in handwriting far too neat for a 5-year-old, my daughter had written, "They want their stories back." I asked Lucy, who told her to draw this. She looked at me with eyes that seemed too old for her face and said, "The lady with the red hair. She says you know too much. She says it's time to stop collecting." I'm sharing these stories now because I don't know how much time I have left. If you have children who draw strange things, who see people that aren't there, who know things they shouldn't know, please listen to them. Believe them. And whatever you do, if they ever mention a woman named Miss Catherine, don't wait. Run. Because some drawings aren't just drawings. Some of them are warnings. And some of them are promises. I can hear Lucy talking to someone in her room right now. She's laughing at something I can't hear. Tomorrow I'm taking her somewhere far away. Somewhere without shadows, without woods, without mirrors. But I have a feeling it won't matter. Because Lucy drew one more picture before bed tonight. It showed me at my computer typing these words. And behind me, looking over my shoulder, was a woman with long red hair. She was smiling. The woman at the window. Children see things adults miss. They notice the man who stands too long at the playground fence. They see the shadow that moves when nothing else does. And sometimes they draw pictures of the nice lady who watches them through their bedroom window at night. The lady their parents insist isn't there. This is another collection of children's drawings with deeply disturbing backstories. Robert was going through his 7-year-old daughter's backpack one Friday evening. Amy had been acting strange lately, more quiet than usual, and he wanted to check if everything was okay at school. Between the crumpled homework sheets and broken crayons, he found a stack of drawings held together with a paper clip. The first drawing seemed innocent enough. It showed their house at night with all the windows dark except for Amy's room on the second floor. But there was something else in the picture. A figure standing in the backyard, looking up at Amy's lit window. The figure was drawn as a woman with long black hair wearing what looked like a white dress. Robert felt his stomach tighten as he flipped to the next drawing. This one showed the same scene but from inside Amy's room. Through the window, the woman's face was visible. She was smiling and waving. Amy had drawn herself in bed, waving back. The third drawing made Robert's hands shake. The woman was no longer outside. She was in Amy's room, sitting on the edge of her bed. Amy had drawn herself sitting up, and the two figures appeared to be talking. At the bottom of the page, in Amy's shaky handwriting, were the words, "Mrs. White visits me every night now." Robert immediately went to find his wife, Karen. She was in the kitchen preparing dinner. "We need to talk about Amy," he said, showing her the drawings. Karen looked through them, her face growing paler with each image. This has to be just her imagination, right? Kids have imaginary friends all the time." "Look at the last one," Robert said. The final drawing in the stack showed Amy and the woman holding hands. But they weren't in Amy's room anymore. They were somewhere else, somewhere with no walls or floor, just darkness all around them. Amy had tried to color the background with black crayons so heavily that the paper was starting to tear. Underneath this drawing, Amy had written, "Where Mrs. White wants to take me." That night, Robert and Karen sat down with Amy after dinner. They tried to keep their voices calm and casual. "Sweetheart, can you tell us about these drawings? Who is Mrs. White?" Amy's face lit up. "She's my friend. She comes to see me at night. She tells me stories about where she lives." "Where does she live?" Karen asked. "In the dark place. She says it's not scary once you get used to it. She says there are other kids there too. Kids she brought to play with her because she was lonely." Robert felt ice in his veins. "Amy, how long has Mrs. White been visiting you?" Amy thought for a moment. "Since my birthday. She said 7 is a special age. That's when kids can see her. She was waiting for me to turn 7. That had been 3 months ago. 3 months of this woman, real or imagined, visiting their daughter without their knowledge." "What does Mrs. White look like?" Karen asked. Instead of answering, Amy grabbed a piece of paper and started drawing. Her parents watched as she carefully drew a woman's face. Long black hair that seemed to move on its own. Pale skin that Amy colored with white crayon. A smile that was too wide, showing too many teeth. But the worst part was the eyes. Amy had drawn them solid black, like holes in the woman's face. "She's pretty, right?" Amy said, holding up the drawing. "She says she used to be even prettier before the accident." "What accident?" Robert asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "The one that made her sleep in the ground. She doesn't like to talk about it. She just says she woke up in the dark and couldn't find her way back to the light. So now she lives in between." That night, Robert and Karen took turns staying awake, watching Amy's room. They had moved a chair into the hallway where they could see her door. Nothing happened. Amy slept peacefully, and there were no signs of any visitors, imaginary or otherwise. But the next morning, Amy had a new drawing on her nightstand. Neither Robert nor Karen had seen her make it. It showed Mrs. White standing in their hallway, right outside Amy's door. She was looking directly at the viewer with those black hole eyes. At the bottom, in handwriting that didn't look like Amy's, were the words, "I don't like being watched." They installed cameras in Amy's room and the hallway that same day. They also put new locks on all the windows and started checking on Amy every hour during the night. For a week, nothing happened. Amy seemed disappointed that Mrs. White hadn't visited, but Robert and Karen were relieved. Then they reviewed the camera footage from the 7th night. At 3:33 a.m., Amy sat up in bed. She was looking at the corner of her room, nodding as if listening to someone. She got out of bed and walked to the window. The new lock opened by itself. Amy climbed back into bed and continued staring at the corner. But here's what made Robert call the police. In the corner where Amy was looking, the shadows were wrong. They didn't match the furniture or the night light. They formed a shape, a human shape. And for just one frame of the video, barely visible, there was a face in those shadows. A woman's face with black holes for eyes. The police didn't take it seriously at first. Kids have imaginary friends. Parents get worried over nothing. But then Robert showed them something else he'd found. He'd researched their house's history and discovered that in 1987, a woman named Margaret White had lived there. She'd fallen down the stairs and broken her neck. She was found 3 days later. The newspaper article included a photo. Long black hair, pale skin, a wide smile. She looked exactly like Amy's drawings. The police suggested the family might want to stay somewhere else for a while. Robert and Karen didn't need to be told twice. They packed up and went to Karen's mother's house across town. But Amy brought her drawings with her, and she kept making new ones. The new drawings showed Mrs. White following them, standing outside the grandmother's house, watching through different windows, getting closer. In one drawing, Amy showed Mrs. White inside the house, standing at the foot of the bed where Amy was sleeping. The expression on Mrs. White's face had changed. She wasn't smiling anymore. "She's angry," Amy said when they asked her about it. "She says I broke my promise. She says I was supposed to go with her last week. Now she has to come get me." They tried everything. A priest came to bless both houses. A medium claimed to cleanse Amy's aura. A child psychologist said Amy was processing some kind of trauma through her imagination. But the drawings continued, and they were getting worse. Amy drew pictures of other children now. Children in old-fashioned clothes standing in dark places. Children with sad faces and black holes where their eyes should be. Mrs. White's friends, Amy explained. The ones who went with her. She says I'll like them. She says we'll play forever. One night, Karen woke up to find Amy standing beside her bed. "Mommy," Amy whispered. "Mrs. White says if I don't go with her soon, she'll take you and Daddy instead. She says she's tired of waiting. She says 7-year-olds are best, but grown-ups will do." The next morning, they found Amy's window open again despite being locked and nailed shut. On the windowsill was a drawing they knew Amy hadn't made. The style was different, older somehow. It showed a house they didn't recognize with a little girl in the window. The girl looked like Amy but was wearing clothes from decades ago. At the bottom, in spidery handwriting, were the words, "She could have been my daughter. Now she will be." They moved again. Changed Amy's school. Even considered leaving the state. But everywhere they went, Amy kept drawing Mrs. White. And Mrs. White kept getting closer. The last drawing Amy made before everything changed showed something different. It wasn't Mrs. White or the dark place or the other children. It was Amy herself, but split in two. One Amy was in the light, holding her parents' hands. The other Amy was in the dark, holding Mrs. White's hand. Between them was a door standing by itself, half open. "I have to choose," Amy said, tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. White says I can't stay in between anymore. I have to pick a side. Light or dark. You or her." That night they heard Amy screaming. They ran to her room to find her being pulled toward the open window by something they couldn't see. Robert grabbed her arms while Karen held her waist. For a moment, it felt like they were in a tug of war with the air itself. Then suddenly the pulling stopped. Amy collapsed into their arms. She didn't speak for 3 days. When she finally did, she said only one thing: "She's still waiting." They thought it was over. Amy stopped drawing Mrs. White. She seemed to return to her normal self. Months passed. They began to relax. Then on Amy's 8th birthday, they found a package on the doorstep. No return address. Inside was a drawing. Not one of Amy's. This one was old, the paper yellowed with age. It showed a woman with long black hair standing at the bottom of a staircase. At the top of the stairs was a small girl. The woman was reaching up toward her. Robert turned the drawing over. On the back, in that same spidery handwriting, were the words, "Happy birthday, Amy. You're 8 now. It is too old. But I know where to find more 7-year-olds. Your friends at school. Your cousins. That little girl next door. Thank you for showing me. Love, Mrs. White." Amy never drew another picture of Mrs. White. But sometimes, when they drive past playgrounds or schools, Amy points at certain children. "She's watching that one," Amy will say quietly. She likes the ones who are almost 7. They've tried to warn other parents. But who would believe them? It's just a child's imagination running wild. Just drawings. Just make-believe. But every year in their town, at least one 7-year-old starts drawing pictures of a woman with long black hair who visits them at night. A woman who wants to take them to the dark place. A woman named Mrs. White. And every year, at least one of those children disappears. The police have a file now. Dozens of drawings from different children over the years, all showing the same woman, all with the same black hole eyes, all with the same too wide smile. They don't know what to do with the file. You can't arrest a drawing. You can't stop an imaginary friend. But Robert and Karen know the truth. Mrs. White isn't imaginary. She's just waiting. Waiting in the dark. Waiting for the next 7-year-old to see her. Waiting to not be lonely anymore. The boy who drew tomorrow. Some children draw what they see. Others draw what they imagine. But Brian drew what hadn't happened yet. His parents thought it was coincidence at first. Then they thought it was lucky guesses. By the time they realized the truth, it was too late to stop what was coming. Daniel first noticed something strange about his 6-year-old son Brian's drawings on a Tuesday afternoon. He was working from home when Brian came running into his office, proudly holding up his latest creation. "Look, Daddy, I drew our house." Daniel glanced at the drawing and smiled. It showed their 2-story house, but something was different. There was a big tree in the front yard that had fallen over, its branches spread across their lawn. The strange thing was the oak tree in their yard was perfectly healthy. "That's great, buddy. But why is the tree lying down?" Brian shrugged. "That's how it's going to look tomorrow." Daniel chuckled and ruffled his son's hair. Kids had such wild imaginations. But the next morning he woke up to the sound of chainsaws. During the night, a storm had blown through. The oak tree in their front yard had fallen, its branches spread across the lawn exactly as Brian had drawn it. Daniel stood at the window, coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips, staring at the fallen tree. Then he looked at Brian's drawing, still sitting on his desk. They were identical. Every branch was in the right place. He mentioned it to his wife, Jessica, that evening. She laughed it off. "It's just a coincidence. We've been having storms all week. He probably just made a lucky guess." But then Brian drew another picture. This one showed their neighbor, Mr. Hamilton, with his arm in a sling. 2 days later, Mr. Hamilton fell off a ladder while cleaning his gutters and broke his arm. Brian drew their cat, Whiskers, with a bandage around her tail. The next day, Whiskers got her tail caught in a door and needed stitches. He drew Jessica's car with a crack across the windshield. 3 days later, a rock kicked up by a truck on the highway cracked her windshield in the exact pattern Brian had drawn. Daniel started keeping all of Brian's drawings in a folder. He dated each one and wrote notes about when they came true. Because they always came true. Every single one. "Brian," Daniel asked one evening, sitting on his son's bed, "when you draw these pictures, how do you know what to draw?" Brian looked up from his coloring book. "The man tells me." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. "What man?" "The man who lives in my head. He shows me pictures and I draw them. He says I'm special. He says I can see through the window." "What window?" "The window to tomorrow. He says most people can't see through it, but I can. And if I keep practicing, I'll be able to see even further. Next week, next month, maybe even next year." Daniel tried to keep his voice calm. "What does this man look like?" Brian grabbed a fresh piece of paper and started drawing. He drew a tall figure with no real features, just a shadow in the shape of a man. But the eyes were detailed. They were large and seemed to stare right off the page. At the bottom, Brian wrote, "Mr. Tomorrow." That night, Daniel showed the drawing to Jessica. They agreed to take Brian to see a child psychologist. Maybe this was some kind of coping mechanism or an overactive imagination. But deep down, they both knew something was wrong. The drawings were too accurate, too specific. The psychologist, Dr. Morrison, was skeptical at first. Then Daniel showed her the folder of drawings and the photos he'd taken of each prediction coming true. Her expression changed from professional interest to genuine concern. "Has Brian shown any other unusual behaviors?" she asked. "He's been having nightmares," Jessica said. "He wakes up crying about things he won't explain. And sometimes we find him sitting in his room, staring at nothing, like he's watching something we can't see." Dr. Morrison asked to speak with Brian alone. They were in her office for almost an hour. When they came out, Brian seemed tired and Dr. Morrison looked troubled. "I'd like to see Brian twice a week," she said. "There's something unusual happening here and I want to monitor it closely." But Brian's drawings were becoming more disturbing. He drew their house surrounded by police cars. He drew Jessica crying at the kitchen table. He drew Daniel packing boxes. And in every drawing, the shadow man was there, standing in the background, watching. When are these things going to happen? Daniel asked Brian one night. Mr. Tomorrow won't tell me exactly when. He says I'm not ready to know that yet. He says I need to practice more first. He says if I'm good, he'll teach me to change the pictures. Change them how? Make different things happen. He says the future isn't set in stone. It's like a drawing that isn't finished yet. If you know what's coming, you can add new lines, change the picture. Daniel felt sick. Brian, I don't want you talking to Mr. Tomorrow anymore. Brian's face went pale. I can't stop. He won't let me. He says if I stop drawing what he shows me, he'll show me something really bad. Something about you and Mommy. Something I can't change. The next day, Brian drew a picture that made Daniel's blood run cold. It showed a car accident. Their car crumpled against a tree. 3 figures inside, not moving. The date was written at the top, December 15th. That was only a week away. Daniel and Jessica decided not to drive anywhere on December 15th. They would stay home, keep safe, avoid any possibility of the accident happening. But on the morning of December 15th, Jessica got a call. Her mother had fallen and was in the hospital. She needed to go. We'll take a taxi, Daniel said, or call an Uber. We're not driving. But every taxi was busy. Every Uber was too far away. Jessica's mother was asking for her. Finally, they decided to risk it. They would drive very carefully, take back roads, go slow. They made it to the hospital safely. Jessica's mother was fine, just a sprained ankle. They were relieved. The drawing had been wrong. They started to drive home, feeling like they'd beaten fate. That's when the deer ran into the road. Daniel swerved to avoid it, lost control, and the car hit a tree. It was exactly like Brian's drawing. But by some miracle, they all survived with only minor injuries. The paramedics said they were lucky. A few inches to the left, and it would have been fatal. When they got home, they found Brian in his room, drawing frantically. Pages and pages covered the floor, all showing the same thing, the shadow man, Mr. Tomorrow, but now he was angry. His eyes were red, and he was reaching out of the paper with hands like claws. He's mad, Brian said, tears streaming down his face. You weren't supposed to survive. You changed the picture. Now he says I have to be punished. He says I have to draw something else. Something worse. What does he want you to draw? Jessica asked, kneeling beside her son. Brian held up his latest drawing. It showed him standing with Mr. Tomorrow, but they weren't in Brian's room. They were somewhere else. Somewhere dark and empty. And Brian looked different in the drawing. Older. His eyes were large and staring, just like Mr. Tomorrow's. He says if I don't go with him, he'll make bad things happen to everyone I love. He says I've seen too much. I know too much. I can't stay here anymore. Daniel grabbed the drawing and tore it up. You're not going anywhere. Mr. Tomorrow isn't real. He can't hurt us. But that night, things started happening. Things Brian hadn't drawn. The lights flickered on and off. Doors slammed shut by themselves. They heard footsteps in the hallway when no one was there. And in Brian's room, they found new drawings. Hundreds of them. All showing terrible things. Disasters. Accidents. Deaths. And all dated in the near future. He's showing me everything, Brian whispered. All the bad things that are going to happen. He says if I don't go with him, he won't let me warn anyone. People will die, and it will be my fault. They tried to get help. They called priests, mediums, anyone who might believe them. But who would believe a story about a boy who could draw the future and a shadow man who lived in his head? Then Brian drew something that changed everything. He drew Dr. Morrison's office, but it was empty. Her desk was cleaned out, her diplomas gone from the walls. The next day they got a call. Dr. Morrison had died in her sleep. Heart attack, they said. She was only 42 and in perfect health. Brian hadn't drawn her death. He'd drawn what came after. And that terrified Daniel more than anything else. Brian wasn't just seeing the future now. He was seeing the consequences, the ripple effects, the empty spaces left behind. I have to go, Brian said that night. He was calm now, resolved. Mr. Tomorrow says I've learned enough. He says there are other kids like me. Kids who can see through the window. He needs to teach them too. And I can help. Brian, please, Jessica begged. We can figure this out. We can find a way to make him leave you alone. Brian shook his head. He won't leave. He can't. He says he's part of me now. The part that sees. And if I don't go with him, That part will grow and grow until there's nothing left of me. Until I'm just like him. A shadow showing other kids the future. That night, they locked Brian's door. They stayed up watching him. But in the morning, he was gone. The door was still locked. The windows were still closed. But Brian was gone. They found one last drawing on his pillow. It showed Daniel and Jessica, older, standing in Brian's empty room. They were looking at a photo album. And in the photos, Brian was growing up. Getting older. Graduating. Getting married. Having kids of his own. All the futures he might have had. At the bottom, in Brian's careful handwriting, were the words, "The pictures that will never come true. I'm sorry. I love you. Don't look for me. You won't find me. On tomorrow now." The police searched for months. They found nothing. No trace of Brian. No sign of where he'd gone. Daniel and Jessica grieved and hoped and waited for their son to come home. But sometimes, other parents contact them. Parents whose children have started drawing things that haven't happened yet. Children who talk about a man who shows them pictures through the window to tomorrow. Children who mention another boy who helps the man. A boy named Brian who used to be normal but now has eyes that stare and see too much. Daniel keeps all of Brian's old drawings in a locked box in the garage. He can't bring himself to look at them, because some of them show dates that haven't happened yet. Drawings of events still to come. And he's terrified that one day he'll find a drawing of Brian coming home. But in the drawing, Brian won't be alone. And he won't be a child anymore. He'll be like Mr. Tomorrow. A shadow showing other children their futures. Teaching them to see through the window. Taking them away when they've learned too much. Daniel wonders sometimes if Brian knew this would happen. If somewhere in all those drawings is a picture of an empty room and grieving parents. If Brian saw his own future and went anyway. Or if some futures can't be drawn, can't be changed, can't be stopped. He hopes he never finds out. The friend in the mirror. Children often create imaginary friends. It's a normal part of growing up. But when 8-year-old Sophia started talking to someone in the mirror, her parents realized this was something else entirely. Because Sophia's friend didn't stay in the mirror. And she was teaching Sophia things no child should know. Marcus was fixing dinner when he first heard his daughter talking to someone in the bathroom. The door was closed, but he could hear Sophia's voice clearly, having what sounded like a full conversation. He smiled to himself. Kids and their imaginary friends. But then he heard something that made him stop chopping vegetables. Sophia was speaking, but not in English. The words were strange, guttural, unlike any language Marcus had ever heard. He walked down the hallway and knocked on the bathroom door. "Sophia? You okay in there, sweetie?" The talking stopped immediately. He heard the faucet turn on, then off. Sophia opened the door, her face slightly flushed. "Hi, Daddy. I was just washing my hands." "Who were you talking to?" "Nobody," Sophia said, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. "Can I have a snack?" Marcus let it go, but he mentioned it to his wife, Elena, later that night. Elena laughed. "She's probably just making up her own language. Remember when she insisted her name was Princess Butterfly for 3 months? But over the next few days, Marcus noticed Sophia spending more and more time in the bathroom. Always with the door closed. Always talking in that strange language. And when she came out, she looked tired, drained even. One evening, Elena was helping Sophia with her homework when Sophia suddenly said, "Maria knows the answer." "Who's Maria?" Elena asked. "My friend in the mirror. She knows everything. She's been around for a very long time." Elena felt a twinge of unease. "The mirror in the bathroom?" Sophia nodded. "She lives there. But she can't come out. Not yet. She says she needs my help first." That night, Elena and Marcus checked the bathroom mirror. It was just a regular mirror, nothing special about it. But when they looked closer, they noticed something odd. In the bottom corner, there were small scratches in the glass. They looked like letters, but in no alphabet they recognized. "Sophia, did you scratch the mirror?" Marcus asked. Sophia shook her head. "Maria did. She was trying to write her whole name, but she's not strong enough yet. She needs me to help her get stronger." "How do you help her get stronger?" Elena asked, trying to keep her voice light. "I let her borrow my energy. When I look in the mirror and say the special words, she can use my energy to do things. Yesterday she made the lights flicker. Today she moved my hairbrush. She says soon she'll be able to do more." Marcus and Elena exchanged worried glances. That night, they covered the bathroom mirror with a sheet. But in the morning they found the sheet on the floor and Sophia in the bathroom, staring at the mirror and speaking in that strange language again. When they confronted her, Sophia got upset. "You don't understand. Maria is my friend. She's lonely. She's been trapped in there for so long. She just wants someone to talk to." "Sophia, there's no one in the mirror," Elena said gently. "It's just your reflection." Sophia grabbed a piece of paper and started drawing. She drew the bathroom mirror, but in the reflection was not Sophia but another girl. This girl had long dark hair and a white dress. Her eyes were completely black and her smile was too wide. "This is Maria," Sophia said. "She's 8 years old like me. She's been 8 years old for a very long time." The drawing disturbed Marcus and Elena so much that they decided to remove the bathroom mirror entirely. But when Marcus tried to take it down, he found it was attached to the wall in a way that made no sense. It was like the mirror had grown into the wall itself. No matter how hard he pulled, it wouldn't budge. That night, they heard Sophia get up and go to the bathroom. They followed quietly and listened at the door. Sophia was speaking in that strange language again, but now there was another voice responding. A voice that sounded like Sophia's but different. Older, colder. Marcus threw open the door. Sophia was standing in front of the mirror, her hands pressed against the glass. And in the reflection, her mouth was moving differently than her actual mouth. Like the reflection was saying different words. "Sophia, step away from the mirror," Marcus said firmly. Sophia turned to look at him and her eyes were wrong. They were darker than usual, almost black. "Maria says you're being mean. She says parents never understand. That's why she had to leave her parents behind." "What happened to Maria's parents?" Elena asked, her voice shaking. Sophia tilted her head. "They tried to break the mirror, so Maria had to pull them in. They're with her now. Forever. She says they're not very good company anymore. That's why she needs a new friend." They took Sophia out of the bathroom and shut the door. But they could hear sounds from inside. Scratching, whispering, and sometimes soft laughter that didn't sound like it belonged to a child. The next day they called a priest. Father Rodriguez was skeptical at first, but when he saw the mirror, his expression changed. He tried to bless it with holy water, but the water sizzled and evaporated as soon as it touched the glass. "This is beyond my expertise," he admitted, "but I know someone who might help. There's a woman who specializes in unusual cases like this." The woman, Dr. Catherine Voss, arrived the next day. She wasn't what Marcus and Elena expected. She was young, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, carrying what looked like a toolbox. "Show me the mirror," she said without preamble. They led her to the bathroom. Dr. Voss studied the mirror for a long time, taking measurements, making notes. Then she turned to Sophia. "You've been talking to Maria." Sophia nodded. "What has she told you about herself?" "She says she's been in mirrors for a long time. Not just this one. She moves from mirror to mirror looking for friends. But most kids can't see her." "I'm special." Dr. Voss nodded. "You are special. But Maria isn't what she says she is. She's not a little girl. She's something else. Something that feeds on energy, on life. And she's using you to get stronger." "You're lying," Sophia shouted. "Maria is my friend." That night, despite their precautions, they found Sophia in the bathroom again. But this time, she had a hammer from Marcus's toolbox. She was hitting the mirror, trying to break it. "I have to let her out," Sophia was saying. "She says she's ready. She's strong enough now. She just needs me to break the glass so she can come through." Marcus grabbed the hammer away from her. The mirror had several cracks now, spreading out like a spider web. And in those cracks, something was moving. Something dark and liquid-looking. They pulled Sophia out of the bathroom and locked the door. But the sounds from inside got louder. Banging, scraping, and then the sound of glass breaking. They opened the door to find the mirror shattered. But the pieces weren't on the floor. They were floating in the air, spinning slowly. And in each piece was a reflection of a different child. Dozens of them. All with black eyes. All smiling that too wide smile. "My friends," Sophia said dreamily. Maria brought all her friends. Dr. Voss arrived within minutes of their frantic call. She took one look at the floating mirror shards and pulled out what looked like a modified vacuum cleaner from her toolbox. Everyone out of the house. Now. They ran outside and watched from the lawn as lights flashed in the bathroom window. They could hear Dr. Voss shouting in what sounded like Latin. There was a sound like thunder and then silence. Dr. Voss emerged an hour later looking exhausted. It's done. The entity is contained. But Sophia needs to be monitored. Once they make a connection with a child, they sometimes try to reconnect through other reflective surfaces. She was right. Over the next few weeks, Sophia tried to talk to Maria in every mirror, window, and shiny surface she could find. They had to cover all the mirrors in the house and never leave her alone. Slowly, Sophia seemed to return to normal. She stopped trying to talk to Maria. She stopped drawing disturbing pictures. She seemed like their little girl again. But sometimes, Marcus would catch her staring at her reflection in a spoon or a doorknob, and she would be whispering in that strange language. When he asked her about it, she would say, "Maria says she's waiting. She says she'll find another mirror, another house, another friend. She says she has all the time in the world." They moved houses, changed schools, started fresh. But Sophia never forgot about Maria. She drew pictures sometimes when she thought her parents weren't looking. Pictures of mirrors with children trapped inside. Pictures of a girl with black eyes and a too-wide smile. And at the bottom of every drawing, in that strange language that Sophia somehow still remembered, were words that Dr. Voss later translated for them. She's still watching. She's always watching. In every reflection, in every piece of glass. Waiting for another special child. Waiting to be let out. They threw away all of Sophia's drawings. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, they would hear her whispering in her sleep. Whispering in that strange language. Having conversations with someone who wasn't there. Or maybe someone who was there, just on the other side of every reflective surface, waiting for another chance to break through. They don't have mirrors in their house anymore. They use their phones for grooming, position them carefully so Sophia can't see the black screen when they're off. They painted over the windows in Sophia's room. But you can't eliminate all reflections. They're in puddles after rain. In the windows of passing cars. In the eyes of other people. And sometimes, when the light hits just right, Marcus swears he can see something in those reflections. A girl with black eyes and a too-wide smile. Watching. Waiting. Looking for her next special friend. The drawings that got me institutionalized. I'm 34 years old now. I have a normal job, a small apartment, and I take medication every day. Most people who meet me would never guess that I spent 3 years in a psychiatric facility as a teenager. They'd never know about the drawings, or about what those drawings showed me. But I think it's time to tell this story. Maybe someone out there will understand. Maybe someone else saw what I saw, drew what I drew, and maybe they need to know they're not alone. Or maybe they need to be warned. This happened when I was 15. That's important to remember. 15 is a strange age. You're not a child anymore, but you're not quite an adult. You're caught in between. And sometimes, when you're caught in between, you can see things that other people can't. It started in art class. I'd always been good at drawing, but nothing special. I could sketch a decent portrait, shade properly, get the proportions right. Mrs. Henderson said I had potential. But that Tuesday afternoon in October, something changed. We were doing still life drawings. There was a bowl of fruit on a table at the front of the room. Boring stuff. Apples, bananas, a couple of pears. I started sketching like everyone else. But as my pencil moved across the paper, I realized I wasn't drawing the fruit anymore. I was drawing a room I'd never seen before. My hand was moving on its own, creating details I hadn't planned. A basement with concrete walls. A single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. And in the corner, huddled against the wall, was a girl about my age. She looked terrified. "Sam? Sam, are you listening?" I snapped back to reality. Mrs. Henderson was standing over my desk, looking at my drawing with a concerned expression. "This isn't the assignment," she said quietly. I looked down at my paper. The drawing was incredibly detailed. More detailed than anything I'd ever drawn before. You could see the water stains on the concrete walls. The fear in the girl's eyes. The rope around her wrists. I don't know why I drew this," I said honestly. Mrs. Henderson took the drawing. "Stay after class. We need to talk." But I couldn't explain it to her. How could I? I didn't understand it myself. She kept the drawing and sent me to the guidance counselor. They asked if I was having violent thoughts, if I was planning to hurt someone, if someone had hurt me. The answer to all of those questions was no. I was just a normal 15-year-old. I played video games, struggled with algebra, had a crush on Ashley Morrison. I didn't have dark fantasies about kidnapped girls in basements. But the drawings continued. That night, I was doing homework when my hand started moving again. I watched, disconnected from my own body as I drew another scene. The same basement, the same girl. But now there was someone else in the picture. A man, his face hidden in shadow, reaching toward her. I tried to stop drawing, but I couldn't. My hand cramped from gripping the pencil so tightly, but it kept moving, adding details. The girl's torn clothes, the bruises on her arms, the date on a calendar visible in the background, October 15th. That was 3 days away. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my desk, staring at the drawing, trying to make sense of it. Was I going crazy? Was this some kind of breakdown? I'd heard about teenagers having psychotic episodes. Was that what this was? The next day at school, I tried to act normal. But in every class, if I had a pencil in my hand, I would start drawing. The same room, the same girl. Progressive scenes like frames from a movie I didn't want to watch. By lunch, I had a stack of drawings, each one showing something worse than the last. I was about to throw them all away when I heard two girls talking at the next table. Did you hear about Rebecca Chin? She didn't come home last night. Her parents are freaking out. My blood ran cold. I looked at my drawings again. The girl in the basement, Asian features, long black hair, wearing what looked like a school volleyball uniform. Our school's colors. I didn't know Rebecca Chin personally. She was a junior, a year older than me, but I'd seen her around. And now, looking at my drawings, I realized I'd been drawing her face. A face I barely knew but had somehow captured perfectly. I should have gone to the police. I know that now, but I was 15 and terrified. Who would believe me? Hey officers, I've been unconsciously drawing pictures of a missing girl in a basement. No, I don't know where the basement is. No, I don't know who took her. I just draw things. They'd think I was involved, or crazy, or both. So I did something stupid. I decided to figure it out myself. That night, I sat at my desk with a pencil and paper and I tried to make it happen. I tried to let go, to let my hand draw whatever it wanted. For an hour, nothing. Just meaningless scribbles. Then, as I was about to give up, the feeling came back. That disconnection. That sense of watching my hand move without controlling it. This time, I drew the exterior of a building. A warehouse or old factory. Broken windows. A faded sign I couldn't quite make out. And in the corner of the drawing, a street sign. Industrial Boulevard and 42nd Street. I knew where that was. The old industrial district on the east side of town. Abandoned buildings that kids sometimes broke into to drink or smoke or whatever. But I'd never been there myself. I snuck out after my parents went to bed. Took my bike and rode across town in the dark. It was stupid, dangerous, but I kept thinking about that girl in my drawings. Rebecca, scared and alone. The industrial district was even creepier at night than I'd imagined. Empty buildings loomed like dead giants. Broken glass crunched under my bike tires. I almost turned back a dozen times. Then I saw it, the building from my drawing. Every detail was perfect. The broken windows in the exact same places. The faded sign that I could now read, Hartman Textiles. Even the graffiti matched. I called 911 from a payphone down the street. Gave them an anonymous tip about Rebecca Chin and the address. Then I rode home as fast as I could, my heart hammering the whole way. The next morning it was all over the news. Police had found Rebecca Chin in the basement of the abandoned Hartman Textiles building. She was alive but traumatized. A 37-year-old man named Dennis Hartman, whose family had once owned the building, was arrested at the scene. I should have felt relief. I'd helped save her. But all I felt was terror. Because that morning, my hand was already drawing again. A different room. A different victim. A different horror that hadn't happened yet. I tried to stop. I threw away all my pencils, my pens, anything I could draw with. But the compulsion was too strong. I'd find myself drawing with anything. A stick in the dirt. My finger in spilled salt. Once, horrifyingly, my own blood from a nosebleed. The drawing showed me things nobody should see. Accidents before they happened. Crimes being planned. Death approaching people who had no idea. And I couldn't control it. Couldn't turn it off. Couldn't choose what to see. I started trying to prevent the things I drew. Left anonymous warnings. Called in tips. But it didn't always work. Sometimes I was too late. Sometimes the drawings were too vague. Sometimes nobody believed the warnings. And the worst part? The drawings were getting darker. More frequent. More detailed. It was like once I'd opened this door, whatever was on the other side wanted to show me everything. Every horrible thing that was going to happen. Every tragedy. Every moment of suffering. I stopped sleeping. Stopped eating. My grades plummeted. My parents found my hidden stash of drawings and immediately took me to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist took one look at the detailed drawings of future tragedies and had me hospitalized for evaluation. I spent the next 3 years in various facilities. They tried everything. Medication, therapy, CT. They diagnosed me with everything from schizophrenia to temporal lobe epilepsy. But the drawings didn't stop. The doctors said the drawings were delusions, that I was creating elaborate fantasies and convincing myself they were real. They pointed out all the drawings that hadn't come true, and there were many, because by then I was drawing constantly. Hundreds of images a day. Most of them were meaningless, but scattered among them were the real ones, the true ones, the ones that would happen. I learned to lie, to pretend the medications were working, to draw only normal things when they were watching, to hide the real drawings, the ones that still came whether I wanted them or not. They released me when I turned 18, declared me stable, cured. But I wasn't cured. I just learned to hide it better. I'm 34 now, like I said. I work in data entry, a job where I don't have to hold a pencil, where I can keep my hands busy typing, where I can pretend to be normal. But I still draw sometimes. Late at night, when the compulsion becomes too strong to resist. I keep the drawings in a storage unit across town. Boxes and boxes of them. Some have already happened. Some are still waiting to come true. Last week, I drew something that made me decide to finally tell this story. I drew myself older, grayer, standing in front of a classroom, teaching. And behind me on the board were drawings. My drawings. And in the classroom seats were teenagers, all drawing furiously, their hands moving without their control. At the bottom of my drawing, my hand wrote words I didn't choose. The gift spreads. The door opens wider. They will see what you see. Draw what you draw. Know what should not be known. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it's a warning or a prophecy or just another delusion. But I know the date in the drawing is 20 years from now, when I'll be 54. 20 years to figure out how to stop it. How to close the door I opened. How to prevent whatever is coming. Or maybe this is how it spreads. Maybe by telling this story, I'm planting seeds. Maybe someone reading this will start to notice their hand moving on its own. Start drawing things they didn't plan to draw. Start seeing things that haven't happened yet. If that's you, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But you're not crazy. You're not alone. You're just unfortunate enough to see through the cracks, to glimpse what's coming, to carry the terrible burden of knowing. My advice? Don't fight it. Fighting it only makes it worse. Makes the images darker, more insistent. Let them come. Draw what needs to be drawn. Try to help when you can. Try to warn people. But most importantly, don't tell anyone. Don't end up like me, medicated and monitored, pretending to be cured. Keep it secret. Keep it safe. Keep drawing. Because the drawings will come whether you want them or not. The future will reveal itself through your hands. And maybe if you're very lucky, you'll draw something that helps. Something that saves a life. Something that makes the curse worth bearing. Or maybe you'll just draw horror after horror until you can't tell anymore which nightmares are prophecy and which are just the broken dreams of a broken mind. Either way, keep drawing. It's the only way to stay sane. Even if everyone else thinks you're crazy. The portrait's that aged. I need to tell you something that happened to me when I was 16. I'm 42 now. Married, 2 kids, a mortgage, the whole suburban dream. But sometimes, late at night, when my family is asleep, I go down to the basement, to the locked room. The one my wife thinks is just storage. It's not storage. It's where I keep them. The portraits. The ones that started it all. You see, when I was 16, I discovered something about myself. Something that should have been a gift. Something that became a curse. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. Let me tell you about the first portrait. The one that changed everything. It was September 1998. I was a junior at Lincoln High School. Just another awkward teenager trying to figure out who I was. I'd always been artistic. Always loved drawing faces. There was something about capturing a person's essence on paper. Something that fascinated me. My art teacher, Mr. Kowalski, he used to say I had the eye. Said I could see people in a way others couldn't. could capture not just their features, but their soul. He had no idea how right he was. The first time it happened, I was in study hall, bored out of my mind. I had my sketchbook open, just doodling while pretending to read some assigned novel. Across from me sat Jennifer Martinez. Beautiful Jennifer, with her long dark hair and that little scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood bike accident. I started sketching her. Nothing unusual about that. I drew my classmates all the time. But as my pencil moved across the paper, something felt different. My hand seemed to have its own agenda, adding details I hadn't consciously decided on, lines that didn't match what I was seeing. When I finally looked down at the finished portrait, I felt my stomach drop. It was Jennifer, but not the Jennifer sitting across from me. This Jennifer looked older, maybe 10 years older. Her face was fuller, more mature. There were tiny lines around her eyes. Her hair was shorter, styled differently, professional looking. But the strangest part, the part that made my hand shake, was that she looked happy, genuinely, radiantly happy. Happier than I'd ever seen the real Jennifer, who always seemed to carry some invisible weight on her shoulders. I closed my sketchbook quickly, embarrassed by what I'd drawn. It felt invasive somehow, like I'd seen something private, something that wasn't meant for me. I tried to forget about it, told myself it was just my imagination running wild. But I couldn't stop thinking about that drawing, about how real it had looked, how detailed, how true. 3 days later, Jennifer came to school different. She was smiling, really smiling. When someone asked her what was up, she said her mom had finally left her abusive stepfather. They were moving in with her grandmother, starting fresh. It was the beginning of her becoming the happy person I'd drawn. That should have been my first warning, should have made me stop. But I was 16, and curious, and stupid. I started drawing more portraits. Not during class, that felt too public. But at home, late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd sit at my desk with my headphones on, and I'd draw. My best friend, Marcus. In my drawing, he was older, wearing military dress blues, medals on his chest, standing proud. Which was weird because Marcus was talking about becoming a video game designer. The military was the last thing on his mind. My chemistry teacher, Miss Patterson. In the portrait, she looked tired, defeated, wearing regular clothes instead of her usual sharp suits, standing in what looked like an unemployment office. The old man who ran the corner store, Mr. Chin. In my drawing, his eyes were closed, peaceful, surrounded by flowers. Each portrait showed someone different than who they were now. Older, changed, living different lives, or, in Mr. Chen's case, no life at all. I hid the drawings in a box under my bed. Didn't show anyone. Didn't talk about them. But I couldn't stop making them. It was like a compulsion. An itch that needed scratching. Then, in November, Mr. Chin had a heart attack. Died instantly behind the counter of his store. His funeral looked exactly like my drawing. The same flowers. The same peaceful expression. The same everything. That's when the fear really set in. I wasn't just drawing people as they might be. I was drawing their futures. Their actual futures. Somehow, my pencil knew things that hadn't happened yet. I tried to stop. Threw away my pencils, my sketchbooks, everything. But the urge was too strong. I'd find myself drawing on napkins, on homework, on the margins of textbooks. Faces poured out of me. Futures revealed themselves in graphite and ink. Some were beautiful. I drew Amy Valdez pregnant, glowing with maternal joy. 6 years later, she'd have her first child and send out Christmas cards with that exact same glow. Some were tragic. I drew Robert Turney in a wheelchair, his legs useless, his face brave but broken. 4 years later, car accident, drunk driver, paralyzed from the waist down. But the worst, the absolute worst, were the ones that aged too fast. You see, I started to notice a pattern. Most of my portraits showed people 10, 20, even 30 years in the future. Natural aging, life progressing, but sometimes, rarely, I'd draw someone who looked almost the same. Maybe a year older, maybe 2. Those were the ones who were going to die soon. I drew Melissa Connor in December of my junior year. She looked maybe 6 months older in the portrait, wearing a hospital gown, head wrapped in bandages, eyes vacant, machines all around her, brain tumor, diagnosed the following May, dead by July. I drew Tommy Washington that same winter. In the portrait, he looked exactly like he did in real life, except for the bruises around his neck, the blue tinge to his lips. Suicide. February of senior year. Hung himself in his garage. Each time, I thought about warning them, telling someone. But what would I say? Hey, I drew a picture of you dying, so maybe get checked for brain tumors? They'd think I was insane. Or worse, that I was threatening them. So I kept quiet, kept drawing, kept watching my portraits come true. By senior year, I had hundreds of them, boxes full, a catalog of futures, mostly distant, sometimes terrifyingly near. I'd drawn every student in school, every teacher, every person I passed regularly on the street. I knew who would succeed, who would fail, who would live long lives, who would die young. I knew Marcus would enlist after his father died suddenly sophomore year of college. That Miss Patterson would be laid off in budget cuts and never teach again. That Jennifer would become a social worker, helping kids escape abusive homes. That same radiant smile on her face. The knowledge was crushing, overwhelming. How do you look at someone when you know their future? How do you interact normally when you've seen their death, or their greatest triumph, or their worst failure? I became withdrawn and asocial. My grades slipped. My parents worried. They sent me to therapy, but what could I tell the therapist? That I could draw the future? That I knew she'd divorce her husband in 3 years and move to Portland? The breaking point came in April of senior year. I was in art class, the one place I still felt semi-normal. Mr. Kowalski had us doing self-portraits, looking in mirrors and drawing ourselves. Simple assignment. Should have been safe. But when I looked in that mirror, when I started to draw, my hand betrayed me again. The face that emerged on paper was mine, but different. Older, yes, maybe mid-40s, but that wasn't the disturbing part. The disturbing part was the background. Behind my older self was a room filled with portraits, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, covering every wall, stacked on every surface. And in the corner, barely visible, was a figure, maybe 16, sitting at a desk, drawing frantically. Under my self-portrait, my hand wrote words I didn't choose. The cycle continues. I stared at that drawing for the rest of class, at my future self, surrounded by portraits, watching another teenager draw. Understanding crashed over me like a cold wave. This wasn't going to end, ever. I'd keep drawing, keep seeing, keep knowing, and someday, somehow, I'd pass it on to that figure in the corner, that frantic young artist. Mr. Kowalski noticed my distress, kept me after class, asked if I was okay, and for some reason, maybe because he'd always understood art in a way others didn't, I told him everything. I showed him the portraits, explained what they were, what they meant, showed him the one I'd drawn of him, older, grayer, but still teaching, still inspiring young artists. He looked through them silently, studied each face, each future. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, thoughtful. My grandmother, he said, she had something similar. Not drawings, but dreams. Dreams that came true. She called it the sight. Said it ran in our family. He looked at me with those intense artist eyes. It's a burden, he continued, knowing things you can't change, seeing paths you can't alter. But it's also a responsibility. How? I asked. How is knowing when people die, how they die, a responsibility? Because, he said, pulling out one portrait in particular, the one of Tommy Washington. Sometimes you can change things. Sometimes a word at the right moment, a kindness when someone needs it most, can shift the path. Just a little. Just enough. He was right. I thought about Jennifer, how happy she looked in her portrait. But what if her mom hadn't left? What if that future had been derailed? Would I have drawn a different portrait later? A sadder one? I started paying attention after that. When I drew someone with a near future, especially a dark one, I tried to intervene. Subtly. Carefully. I befriended Tommy. Sat with him at lunch. Invited him to movies. Made sure he knew he wasn't alone. And you know what? It worked. He lived. Graduated. Went to college. I drew him again years later. Older, balder, but alive. Teaching high school English. The rope marks were gone. I couldn't save everyone. Melissa's tumor was too aggressive. Robert still got hit by that drunk driver. But I saved some, changed some paths, made some futures brighter. After graduation, I went to art school. Seemed appropriate. Learned to paint, to sculpt, to work in mediums that didn't lend themselves to unconscious future telling. But I still drew, still made portraits, still filled boxes with futures. I met my wife in college, Sarah. Beautiful, brilliant Sarah. I drew her portrait on our third date. Couldn't help myself. In it, she was older, wearing a wedding ring, holding a baby, standing next to someone whose face was turned away from the viewer. I knew it was me, knew we'd marry, have children, build a life, but I never drew myself again. Never wanted to see my own future after that self-portrait in high school. The one showing me surrounded by portraits, perpetuating the cycle. We did marry, did have children, two beautiful girls who looked just like their mother. And for years, life was normal. I taught art at a community college, painted landscapes on weekends, kept my portraits locked away. But last year, something changed. My oldest daughter, Emma, she's 16 now, same age I was when it started. And last week, I found her sketchbook, found a portrait she'd drawn of her best friend. A portrait that showed her friend 10 years older, wearing a doctor's coat, stethoscope around her neck. Her friend who currently wants to be a professional dancer. The cycle is beginning again, just like my portrait predicted. My daughter has inherited whatever this is, this gift, this curse, this sight. I haven't told her yet, don't know how. Part of me wants to pretend I didn't see it, let her figure it out on her own like I did. But I know that's cruel, know the confusion and fear she'll face. So I'm preparing, writing this all down, documenting everything I've learned over the years. How to handle the knowledge, how to intervene when possible, how to live with seeing death before it comes. Because that's the hardest part, seeing death. I have a portrait of my father, drew it 5 years ago. In it, he's in a hospital bed. Then, well, my mother holding his hand. The cancer that will take him hasn't shown symptoms yet, but it's there, growing, waiting. I have a portrait of my mother, drew it the same day. She's alone, sitting in the same chair she sits in now, but the house is different, smaller, an apartment maybe, the one she'll move to after Dad dies, after she sells the house that holds too many memories. I have portraits of my daughters, both grown, both happy, both living lives I can barely imagine. Emma becomes a teacher, like Mr. Kowalski, uses her gift to help students the way he helped me. My younger daughter, Lily, she becomes a nurse, saves lives with her hands instead of predicting deaths with a pencil. I have a portrait of Sarah, my beautiful wife, gray-haired and laugh-lined, still painting in a sun-filled studio, still beautiful, still mine. We grow old together, just like her portrait promised. But I don't have a recent portrait of myself. Haven't drawn one since high school. I'm too afraid of what I might see. Afraid of confirming what that teenage self-portrait suggested. That this never ends. That I'll spend my whole life surrounded by futures I can't fully change. Although, maybe that's not entirely true. Because Tommy Washington is alive. Teaching. Inspiring kids who need inspiration. Because Jennifer Martinez runs a shelter now. Helps dozens of women escape situations like her mother's. Because Marcus came home from 3 tours in Afghanistan. Wounded but home. The Purple Heart in his portrait balanced by the wedding ring that wasn't there in the first drawing. The one I did after introducing him to my wife's sister. Small changes. Subtle interventions. Lives saved or improved because I knew what was coming and tried, carefully, to nudge fate in a kinder direction. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the gift isn't meant to be a burden but a tool. A way to help. To heal. To hope. Or maybe I'm just trying to justify the unjustifiable. Rationalize the irrational. Make peace with a curse I'll carry forever. Either way, I keep drawing. Keep filling boxes with portraits. Keep watching them come true. And now, I watch my daughter do the same. See her confusion when her drawings don't match reality. Her dawning realization that she's seeing something beyond the present. I'll have to tell her. Explain what she's inherited. Teach her what I've learned. But not tonight. Tonight, she's still just a 16-year-old girl who loves to draw. Still innocent of the weight she'll carry. Still free from the knowledge of how her friends will age, will change, will die. Let her have a few more days of that freedom. A few more nights of drawing without fear. Because once she knows, really knows, she'll never be free again. None of us who draw the future ever are. The portraits age, but we stay frozen, caught between present and future, sketching destinies we can sometimes alter but never fully control. It's a strange existence, a lonely one in many ways, but it's mine, and soon it will be hers. The cycle continues, just like I drew it would, and somewhere out there, maybe reading this, is someone else who draws portraits that don't match the present. Someone else whose hand moves with knowledge it shouldn't have. If that's you, you know that you're not alone. Not crazy. Not cursed. Well, maybe a little cursed. But it's a curse that can become a gift. A burden that can become a purpose. Draw carefully. Intervene wisely. And remember, the future isn't always fixed. Sometimes, with the right pencil stroke at the right moment, you can change everything. Sometimes you can save a life. Sometimes you can only watch it end. But always, always, you draw. Because that's what we do. We who see tomorrow in today's faces. We who sketch souls before they're ready. We draw. And the portraits age. And the cycle continues. Forever. The sketchbook in the attic. Let me tell you about the summer I turned 17. The summer that changed everything. The summer I found the sketchbook. I'm 35 now. Sitting in my office, looking out at the Seattle rain, trying to find the right words to explain what happened. What's still happening. What will never stop happening. But I need to start at the beginning. Need to tell it right. Because if you're reading this, if you found this story somehow, then maybe you found a sketchbook too. Maybe you need to know what I know. Maybe you need to be warned. It was June 2005. My family had just moved into my grandmother's old house in Portland. She died that spring, left the house to my mom, her only daughter. It was one of those classic Portland homes, built in the 1920s, all wood floors and built-in bookshelves and secrets in the walls. I didn't want to move. I was 17, had friends back in California, had a girlfriend, had a life. But my parents were getting divorced, and mom needed a fresh start, and the house was free, so we packed up and drove north. The house smelled like my grandmother, like lavender and old books and something else, something I couldn't quite name. Mom said it would fade, that we'd make new smells, new memories, but that underlying scent never really left. It's still there when I visit, waiting, watching. I picked the attic bedroom. Mom thought I was crazy, said it would be too hot in summer, too cold in winter. But I wanted the isolation, the distance, the walls that slanted with the roof and the window that looked out over the city. It was while setting up that room, while exploring the built-in storage spaces, that I found it, the sketchbook. It was wedged behind a loose board in the closet, like someone had hidden it there deliberately. The cover was leather, old and soft, with no markings, just brown leather worn smooth by handling. I should have left it alone, should have shown it to mom, should have done anything except open it, but I was 17, and curious, and angry about the move, and looking for any distraction from my life. So I opened it. The first page had a note, written in faded ink, in handwriting I didn't recognize. For those who find this, know that every line is true. Every image is real. The past speaks through these pages. Listen carefully. Draw wisely. And whatever you do, never draw yourself. It was signed with initials, EMR. I didn't know who EMR was. Still don't, not really. But I kept reading. Kept turning pages. The sketchbook was filled with drawings. Incredible drawings. Detailed and precise and somehow alive. They seemed to move on the page, to breathe, to watch me as I watched them. The first few were portraits. People in old-fashioned clothes. 1920s maybe. 1930s. Men in suspenders and fedoras. Women in drop-waist dresses. Children in sailor suits. But their faces were wrong. Not distorted or monstrous. Just aware. Like they knew they were being observed. Like they could see me looking at them decades after they were drawn. Then came the other drawings. The ones that made me close the book, set it down, walk away, then come back. Because I had to know, had to see. These weren't portraits. They were scenes, moments, and they were terrible. A house on fire, people trapped inside, their mouths open in silent screams. The detail was extraordinary. You could see the individual flames, the smoke curling, the terror in every face. A car accident, an old Model T wrapped around a tree, bodies thrown clear, blood that looked wet even in pencil and charcoal. A woman at the bottom of a staircase, her neck at an impossible angle, her eyes staring at nothing, a shadow at the top of the stairs that might have been a person pushing. Page after page of tragedy, of death, of moments that should never have been captured. And then, about halfway through the book, the drawing stopped. The rest of the pages were blank, waiting. I should have thrown it away, burned it, shown it to an adult, something, anything. Instead, I kept it. I told myself it was just historical curiosity, some previous owner's morbid hobby. Maybe they'd been a crime scene artist or a newspaper illustrator. Maybe they just had a dark imagination. But I knew better. Even then, I knew. Because the drawings weren't just detailed. They were impossible. They showed angles that the artist couldn't have seen, details they couldn't have known. They weren't drawn from life or imagination. They were drawn from something else. I hid the sketchbook in my room, in the same spot where I'd found it, behind that loose board. But I kept thinking about it, during the day while I unpacked boxes and helped Mom settle in. At night when I lay in my attic room listening to the house creak and settle. Finally, after a week, I took it out again. This time I looked more carefully, studied the technique, the shading, the way the artist had captured light and shadow. I was an artist myself, had been drawing since I could hold a pencil, and I recognized skill when I saw it. But this was beyond skill. This was something else. I got out my own sketchbook, my pencils, sat at my desk by the window, and I tried to copy one of the portraits, just to see if I could capture that same sense of life, of awareness. I chose one of the less disturbing ones, an elderly man in a three-piece suit, dignified looking, kind eyes, a slight smile. I started with the basic shapes, the oval of the face, the proportions. Nothing unusual happened. It was just drawing, just my pencil on paper. But as I added details, as I shaded and refined, something changed. The pencil seemed to move on its own, adding lines I hadn't planned, details I hadn't noticed in the original. A scar on the man's left hand, a pin on his lapel with symbols I didn't recognize, a sadness in his eyes that the smile couldn't quite hide. When I finally stopped, when I set down the pencil and really looked at what I'd drawn, I realized it wasn't a copy anymore. It was a continuation. The man was older. The suit was different. The background had changed from a simple gradient to a detailed room. A study, books on shelves, a fire in a fireplace, and on the mantel, a photograph of a woman in 1920s clothing. But the strangest part, the part that made my hands shake, was that I recognized the room. It was the study downstairs. My grandmother's study. The one Mom was turning into her office. Same bookshelves, same fireplace, same everything. Except we hadn't unpacked the books yet, hadn't lit a fire, hadn't put any photographs on the mantel. I ran downstairs, burst into the study, compared my drawing to the empty room. The proportions were perfect, the architectural details exact. I'd drawn a room I'd only been in once, and I'd drawn it not as it was, but as it had been. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the drawing, about the man, about who he might have been and why I'd drawn him in my grandmother's study. The next morning, I asked Mom about the house's history, tried to be casual about it, said I was just curious about who'd lived here before Grandma. She didn't know much. Said Grandma had bought the house in the 1960s from an estate sale. The previous owners had been the Rosemont family. Built the house in 1923, lived there until, and here Mom paused, until the last of them died in 1959. How did they die? I asked. Mom shrugged. I don't know. Grandma never talked about it. Why this sudden interest in ancient history? I made up some excuse about a school project, but I was already planning my next move. The Portland Library had old newspaper archives, microfiche machines where you could read papers from decades past. I spent the next day there, searching for any mention of the Rosemonts. I found more than I bargained for. Edmund Martin Rosemont, MR, the initials from the sketchbook. He'd been an artist, talented, showed at galleries in Portland and San Francisco, known for his portraits, for capturing the soul behind the smile, as one critic put it. But in 1928, something changed. He stopped showing his work, became reclusive. Neighbors reported strange sounds from the house at night. crying, shouting. Once, what sounded like screaming. Then came the fire. August 15, 1929. The house next door burned to the ground. Family of 5 trapped inside. All died. The investigation found no cause, but Edmund was seen watching from his window, sketching as the flames rose. 2 months later, October 3rd, a car accident on the street outside his house. A Model T hit a tree. Driver killed instantly. Witnesses said the car swerved to avoid something, but the road was clear. Edmund was on his porch, sketching. November 27th, Edmund's wife Catherine fell down the stairs, broke her neck. Edmund found her body. He'd been in his study, sketching. The police investigated, found nothing criminal, just a series of tragedies, bad luck, coincidence. But the neighbors talked, said Edmund knew things, drew things before they happened, said his sketches were cursed, said he'd sold his soul for the ability to capture life on paper, and now death followed his pencil. Edmund lived alone in the house for 30 more years. The tragedies continued, not constantly, but regularly. A drowning here, a heart attack there, always nearby, always when Edmund was sketching. He died in 1959. Natural causes, the paper said. Found in his study, pencil in hand, slumped over his sketchbook. The house was sold. The new owners lasted 6 months before moving out. Said the house felt wrong. Said they heard sketching sounds at night. Said they found drawings slipped under doors, drawings of themselves in situations that hadn't happened yet. My grandmother bought it in 1963. Lived there for over 40 years without incident. Or so we thought. I went home that day with my head spinning. Edmund Martin Rosemont, the man who drew death, and I had his sketchbook, was using his techniques, drawing in his house. That night, I looked at my sketch again, the elderly man in the study, and I noticed something I'd missed before. In the corner of the drawing, barely visible, was a signature. Not mine. Mr. I hadn't signed it, hadn't written those letters, but there they were, in handwriting that matched the note at the beginning of the sketchbook. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence, that I'd unconsciously copied the signature along with the style, but I knew better, because that night, I drew again. I didn't want to, tried not to, but the compulsion was overwhelming, like an itch in my fingers that only drawing could scratch. I sat at my desk, picked up my pencil, and let my hand move. This time I drew a woman, young, pretty, wearing modern clothes, jeans and a t-shirt, standing on a street corner I didn't recognize, looking at her phone, smiling at something on the screen. Behind her, barely visible, was a bus, coming fast, too fast. I tried to stop drawing, tried to put down the pencil, but my hand kept moving, adding details. The bus driver's panicked face, the woman's oblivious smile, the cell phone showing a text message, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Love you." When I finally finished, when my hand finally released the pencil, I was sweating, shaking. The drawing was incredibly detailed, photorealistic, and at the bottom, in handwriting that was mine but not mine, was a date. Tomorrow's date. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. I kept staring at the drawing, at the woman who was going to die tomorrow because she was looking at her phone instead of the street. I had to do something, had to warn her. But how? I didn't know who she was, didn't recognize the street corner. Portland was a big city. The next morning, I took the drawing and went searching, walked for hours, looked at every intersection, every bus route. Nothing matched. By afternoon I was exhausted, defeated, ready to give up. Maybe the drawing was just imagination. Maybe I was losing my mind. Then I saw her. Same face, same clothes, same phone in her hand, walking down Burnside Street toward a busy intersection. I ran, sprinted, reached her just as she stepped off the curb, looking at her phone, smiling at a text. The bus was coming. Driver distracted, not slowing down. I grabbed her arm, pulled her back. Art. She fell onto the sidewalk just as the bus roared past, horn blaring, missing her by inches. She yelled at me, called me crazy, threatened to call the cops. But she was alive, angry and scared and bruised, but alive. I ran, didn't explain, didn't wait for thanks, just ran. But when I got home, when I looked at the drawing, it had changed. The woman was still there, still on her phone. But now she was on the sidewalk, safe. And in the background, barely visible, was a figure running away. A teenage boy with my hair, my clothes, my face. The drawing had redrawn itself. That's when I understood, really understood. The sketchbook didn't just predict the future, it shaped it. Every drawing was a possibility, potential. And the artist, the one who drew it, could change it. Edmund hadn't been drawing deaths. He'd been drawing warnings, possibilities. But he'd chosen not to act, to let them happen, to capture death instead of preventing it. Or maybe he tried it first. Maybe saving people had consequences. Maybe changing fate came with a price. I was about to find out. Because once I'd drawn one future, I couldn't stop. The compulsion grew stronger. Every night, sometimes during the day, I had to draw, had to see, had to know. I drew an old man having a heart attack in Pioneer Square. Found him. Called 911. Saved him. I drew a child falling into the river. Warned the parents. Watched them extra carefully. The child never fell. I drew a house fire starting from bad wiring. Made an anonymous call about a gas leak. The fire department found the problem before it could spark. Each time I changed something, the drawing changed too. Showed the new outcome. The saved life. The prevented tragedy. I thought I was doing good. Being a hero. Using Edmund's curse for better purposes. But the drawings were getting darker. More frequent. More detailed. And worse, they were getting personal. I drew my mom in a car accident. Convinced her not to drive that day. The drawing changed, but the next night I drew her falling downstairs. Stopped that too. Then drowning. Then choking. Then a dozen other deaths, each prevented, each replaced by another possibility. It was like death was hunting her. Like by saving her once, I'd marked her somehow. Made her a target. The same thing happened with everyone I saved. The woman at the bus stop. I drew her dying 6 more times over the next month. Each time in a different way. Each time barely prevented. The old man with the heart attack. He showed up in drawing after drawing. Death reaching for him with skeletal fingers, only to be thwarted at the last second. I was saving lives, but I was also prolonging the inevitable. Death didn't give up. It just got creative. And the toll on me, the physical and mental cost, was adding up. I wasn't sleeping. Couldn't eat. My hands were constantly stained with graphite. My fingers cramped from holding pencils. I'd filled sketchbook after sketchbook with potential deaths. Mom noticed, worried, tried to get me to talk to someone. But what could I say? That I was channeling a dead artist? That I could draw the future? That I was locked in a battle with death itself? She'd have had me committed, so I lied. Said I was fine, just stressed about the move. About starting senior year at a new school. About Dad not calling. But I wasn't fine. I was drowning. And the drawings were getting worse. 'Cause now, I wasn't just drawing strangers. I was drawing classmates, teachers, neighbors. Everyone I met ended up in my sketchbook eventually. Their deaths cataloged, prevented, redrawn. The math teacher who would have been hit by a drunk driver. The grocery clerk who would have slipped and hit her head. The mailman who would have been attacked by a dog. Save after save after save. Death after death after death. And through it all, Edmund's sketchbook sat in my room. Its blank pages slowly filling. Not with my drawings, but with something else. New sketches were appearing. Ones I hadn't made. Detailed drawings in Edmund's style, showing the deaths I'd prevented. But in these versions, I hadn't saved anyone. The bus hit the woman. The man had his heart attack. The child drowned. The sketchbook was showing me what should have happened. What Edmund would have let happen. What the natural order demanded. I tried to stop. Tried to resist the compulsion. Locked my pencils away. Avoided art supplies. But the need was too strong. I drew with anything. Pens. Markers. Charcoal from the fireplace. My own blood when nothing else was available. And the futures kept coming. Endless possibilities of death. Then, October came. The anniversary of Catherine Rosemont's death. And I drew something different. I drew myself. I know. I know the note warned against it. Never draw yourself. But I was exhausted. Desperate. And the pencil moved before I could stop it. In the drawing, I was older. Maybe 25. Sitting in Edmund's study, my grandmother's study, surrounded by thousands of sketchbooks. My hair was gray despite my youth. My eyes were hollow. My hands were twisted into claws from years of constant drawing. And behind me, transparent but visible, stood Edmund, his hand on my shoulder, guiding my pencil, smiling with satisfaction. Under the drawing, words appeared: "The apprentice becomes the master. The cycle continues. Welcome home." I threw the sketchbook across the room, ran to the bathroom, threw up. When I came back, the drawing had changed. Now there were two figures behind me, Edmund and another young man, both transparent, both guiding my hand, and behind them, hints of others. A chain of artists stretching back into shadow. That's when I understood the full truth. Edmund hadn't been the first. He'd found a sketchbook too, hidden in some other house, left by some other cursed artist. And he'd used it, saved lives at first, then grew tired, let deaths happen, added his own gift to the curse. And when he died, the sketchbook waited for the next artist, the next person with the skill and the sensitivity to hear its call. My grandmother had lived in the house for 40 years without finding it. She wasn't an artist, couldn't hear the whispers, couldn't feel the pull, but I could. And now I was trapped, part of the chain. Another link in an endless cycle of artists who drew death. I tried to break free, packed my things, told Mom I wanted to live with Dad. Couldn't stand Portland anymore. But the night before I was supposed to leave, I drew one more picture. It showed a plane, my plane, the one I was taking to California. It was falling from the sky, engines on fire, passengers screaming. I didn't get on that plane, couldn't, made an excuse, unpacked my things. The plane landed safely. The drawing lied. Or did it? Because when I looked at it again, it wasn't my plane anymore. Different flight number, different day. But the crash was still there, still waiting. Edmund's sketchbook had one more blank page, one more space for a drawing. And I knew, with horrible certainty, what would fill it. My death. When it came, however it came, would complete the book, seal my contribution to the curse. And somewhere, in some other city, another sketchbook would appear, waiting for the next young artist to find it. I tried to destroy Edmund's sketchbook, burned it in the fireplace, watched the pages curl and blacken, thought I was free. It was back on my desk the next morning, unburned, unchanged, with a new drawing on that final page. Not my death, something worse. A drawing of me, old and gray, still sketching, still saving lives, still serving the curse, and teaching someone else. A young girl with artistic hands and haunted eyes. My student, my replacement, my victim. That was 18 years ago. I'm 35 now. Like I said, I never left Portland, never escaped the house. Married a woman who understands, or at least accepts, what I do. Had children I pray will never show artistic talent. I draw every day, save who I can, let die who I must. The balance is delicate. Save too many and death grows hungry, vengeful. Save too few and the guilt destroys you. Edmund's sketchbook is complete now, filled with my drawings as well as his. Sits in the study, in his study, waiting. But there are new sketchbooks now, dozens of them, filled with futures prevented and futures allowed. A library of possibility, an archive of almosts. And yes, I've found my replacement. She's 16, goes to the same high school I did. Brilliant artist, sensitive, curious. I've been watching her, the way Edmund must have watched me from whatever plane of existence he inhabits. Next year, her family will move. Financial troubles, divorce, something. And they'll need a cheap place to live. I'll suggest this house. Make the rent affordable. Even offer her the attic room. She'll find a sketchbook. Not Edmund's, that one is mine now. But another one, older, from the artist before Edmund. The cycle reaching back. She'll open it, despite the warnings, despite the fear. Because artists can't resist the call of blank pages and impossible drawings. And I'll be here, to guide her, to teach her, to add another link to the chain. I'm not proud of this, hate myself for it, but I've drawn the alternative. Seen what happens if the chain breaks, if no one takes up the pencil. Death unchecked, tragedies unmourned, futures unwarned. Someone has to hold the pencil. Someone has to see. Someone has to choose who lives and who dies. For now, that someone is me. Listen, God help her, it will be someone else. The sketchbook is waiting. The pages are blank. The pencil is sharp. And somewhere in Portland, a young artist is about to discover exactly what her talent is worth. I'm sorry, Rebecca Chin. That's her name. The next one, the girl I've been watching. I'm so sorry for what's coming, for what you'll find, for what you'll become. But the drawings must continue. The futures must be seen. The chain must not break. Edmund taught me that. The artist before him taught him. And soon, whether I want to or not, I'll teach you. The cycle continues. It always continues. And we, the cursed artists, we just keep drawing, keep choosing, keep serving the hungry pencil that knows too much and shows too much and demands too much. Forever and ever. Until our last page is filled. Until the next sketchbook appears. Until another young artist picks up the pencil and wonders why their hand won't stop moving. Draw carefully, Rebecca. Your time is coming. And when it does, I'll be waiting. In the study. With the sketchbooks. With the knowledge you'll need and the burden you'll carry. Welcome to the chain. May God forgive us all. The girl who drew maps. Listen, I need to tell you something. Something that happened when I was 15. Something that's still happening. Something that will never, ever stop happening. I'm 38 now. Sitting in a small apartment in Chicago. Watching the snow fall. Trying to find the words to explain what my life has become. What it's always been, really. Ever since that day in sophomore year when I drew my first real map. But I should start earlier. Start with the gift that became a curse. Start with the lines that led me here. My name is Madeline. Maddie to most people. And I've always been good with directions. Not just good, uncanny. My parents used to joke that I had an internal GPS. That I could find my way out of anywhere. That I never got lost. They were wrong about that last part. I've been lost for 23 years. But in the beginning, it was just a talent. A quirk. I could look at a map once and remember every detail. Could walk through a neighborhood and know exactly how the streets connected. Could always find the fastest route between 2 points. My freshman year of high school, I started drawing maps for fun. Not copying them, creating them. I'd sit in study hall and sketch out imaginary cities. Invent street names. Plan impossible intersections. Design neighborhoods that could never exist. At least, I thought they could never exist. It was October 2001. I was 15. Sitting in my bedroom on a Saturday afternoon, avoiding homework, drawing another map. This one was different from my usual creations. More detailed, more real. I spent hours on it, adding every alley, every building, every tree. When I finished, I had a complete map of a neighborhood. 12 blocks, 47 streets, hundreds of buildings, all invented, all impossible. Except I recognized one of the street names. Meridian Avenue. That was real. That was here in Chicago. About 6 miles from my house. Curious, I got out a real map of Chicago. Found Meridian Avenue. It was in a neighborhood I'd never visited, never even driven through. But when I looked at the surrounding streets, they didn't match my drawing. According to the real map, Meridian Avenue was surrounded by normal Chicago streets. Madison, Monroe, Adams, the usual grid. But in my drawing, Meridian Avenue was surrounded by streets that didn't exist. Whispering Lane, Forgotten Court, Shadow Street, names I'd invented, names that weren't on any map. I should have thrown the drawing away, should have forgotten about it, should have done anything except what I did, which was get on my bike and ride 6 miles to see for myself. It was getting dark by the time I reached Meridian Avenue, a normal Chicago street. Brick buildings, corner stores, people heading home from work. Nothing unusual, nothing that matched my impossible map. I was about to turn around, feeling foolish, when I noticed something. An alley, right where my map said Whispering Lane should be. It was just an alley, narrow, dark, full of dumpsters and fire escapes. But at the far end, I could see light, like it opened onto another street. But that was impossible. According to the real map, that alley was a dead end. The building on the other side backed right up to the next street. There was no room for a passage. I walked down the alley. Don't ask me why. 15-year-olds make stupid decisions. And I had to know, had to see. The alley was longer than it should have been. Much longer. The buildings on either side seemed to stretch, to grow taller, to lean in. The sounds of traffic faded. The air grew cold. And then, I stepped out the other side, onto Whispering Lane. It was exactly as I'd drawn it. Every detail, every building, every tree. A street that didn't exist, couldn't exist, but there it was, stretching out before me in the dim twilight. The buildings were wrong. Not architecturally, they looked like normal Chicago buildings, but they felt wrong. Too tall, too narrow, too aware, like they were watching me, waiting for something. The street was empty. No cars, no people, no lights in any windows. Just silence and shadows and the feeling that I'd stepped out of my world and into what? I took out my hand-drawn map, compared it to what I was seeing. Perfect match. Every intersection, every address, every impossible detail. According to my map, if I turned left on Whispering Lane and walked 2 blocks, I'd reach Forgotten Court, a cul-de-sac with 7 houses arranged in a perfect circle. I turned left, walked 2 blocks, found Forgotten Court, 7 houses, perfect circle, exactly as I'd drawn. But the houses were occupied. I could see shadows moving behind curtained windows, could hear muffled sounds, music, voices, laughter that didn't sound quite right. I stood there, 15 years old, alone in an impossible neighborhood, and realized I'd done something terrible. I hadn't drawn an imaginary map. I'd drawn a real one, a map of a place that existed alongside Chicago, hidden in the spaces between, accessible only if you knew exactly where to look, only if you had the exact right map, only if you'd drawn it yourself. I ran, turned and ran back the way I'd come, down Whispering Lane, through the alley, back to normal Meridian Avenue where traffic moved and people existed and buildings didn't watch you with window eyes. I got on my bike and rode home faster than I'd ever ridden, burst into my room, grabbed the map to tear it up, and stopped, because the map had changed. Where I'd drawn empty streets, there were now tiny figures, stick people sketched in pencil, moving along the roads, gathering in groups, all facing the same direction, all facing the spot where Whispering Lane met the real world, all facing the alley I'd just run through. I locked the map in a drawer, tried to forget about it, tried to convince myself it had been a hallucination, stress from school, too much caffeine, something. But I couldn't stop thinking about those streets, those impossible, beautiful, terrible streets that I'd somehow brought into being, or discovered. I didn't know what I'd done, only that I'd done it. A week later, I drew another map. I couldn't help myself. The compulsion was overwhelming. Like an addiction, I needed to create streets, to design intersections, to build neighborhoods with my pencil and see if they were real. This map showed a different area, the South Side, a place where Roosevelt Road should have crossed State Street. But in my map, there was something else there, a park that didn't exist, with paths that led to streets that weren't on any official map. Eternal Gardens, I'd labeled it, with radiating avenues named after seasons that never were. Never Spring Avenue, always Winter Drive, sometimes Fall Road. I had to see, had to know if I'd done it again. This time I took the L roaded south to Roosevelt, walked to where State Street should have been, found the park, Eternal Gardens, just as I'd drawn it. Paths winding through trees that were wrong, too tall, too twisted, too alive. And at the far end of each path, entrances to those impossible streets. But this time, I wasn't alone. There were other people in the park. Not many, maybe a dozen, all standing very still, all holding maps, hand-drawn maps, like mine. One of them saw me, an old woman with white hair and pencil-stained fingers. She walked over slowly, carefully, like she was afraid of startling me. "First time?" she asked. I nodded, couldn't speak, could barely breathe. She smiled, a sad knowing smile. It gets easier, and harder, but never better. She held up her own map. I could see dozens of streets, hundreds of impossible intersections, a whole hidden city drawn in shaking lines. "How long?" I managed to ask. 43 years, since I was about your age. Found I could draw maps to places that weren't quite here, places that existed in the between, the underneath, the alongside. What are they? She shrugged. Nobody knows. Maybe they've always been there. waiting for someone to map them. Maybe we create them by drawing them. Maybe it's both. All I know is, once you start, you can't stop. She was right. I couldn't stop. Every week, sometimes every day, I drew new maps, found new places, streets that existed in the gaps between real streets, neighborhoods that overlapped with normal neighborhoods but never quite touched, shadow side, where the buildings were mirrors of real buildings but everything was reversed, the understeets, where you walked on ceilings and the sky was below you, tomorrow town, where everything was exactly one day ahead of the real world, yesterday's end, where lost things gathered and time moved backwards. Each map I drew became real. Each impossible street became possible. And each time I visited, I found more people, other map makers, other artists of impossible geography. We were a secret community, meeting in parks that didn't exist, trading routes to places that shouldn't be, warning each other about streets that were too dangerous to map. Because that was the thing, not all the streets were safe. Some led to places where the geometry hurt to look at, where walking forward took you backward and turning left meant going up. Some were inhabited by things, not people, not animals, just things, that watched from windows that weren't windows, that followed you with sounds that weren't footsteps. Some streets changed while you were on them, rearranged themselves, trapped you in loops, made you walk the same block over and over until you forgot which way was out. I learned to be careful, to add safety features to my maps, exit routes, escape paths, ways back to the real world. But I also learned that the real world was becoming less real to me. Because once you've walked impossible streets, once you've seen the city that exists in the spaces between, the normal world feels flat, limited, like a rough draft of something better. I started spending more time in the hidden neighborhoods, started mapping deeper, further, finding streets that led to other streets that led to entire districts that existed in their own pocket dimensions. My parents worried. My grades slipped. My friends drifted away. But I didn't care. I had my maps, my pencils, my growing atlas of impossible places. By senior year, I was barely attending school. Why sit in a classroom when I could explore the Academy of Never? A school that existed in 6 dimensions where students learned subjects that hadn't been invented yet. Why go to prom when I could dance at the ballroom of always, where every song played simultaneously and partners switched with every beat? Why apply to colleges when I could study at the library of if, where every book that was never written waited on shelves that extended infinitely upward? I was lost in my own creations, lost in the streets I'd drawn, lost in the spaces between. The other map makers tried to warn me, told me to slow down, to remember the real world, to maintain balance. But I was 18 and arrogant, and thought I could handle it. Then I drew the map that changed everything. It was just after graduation. I was sitting in my room, ignored by parents who'd given up trying to understand me, drawing my most ambitious map yet. A map of all the hidden places, every impossible street I'd found, every between space I'd explored, all connected, all linked. A master map of the city that wasn't. It took days, weeks. I barely ate, barely slept, just drew. Line after line, street after street, a complete atlas of nowhere. When I finished, I had created something beautiful and terrible. A map that showed how all the impossible places connected. How you could walk from Shadowside to Tomorrow Town through the understeets. How yesterday's end linked to eternal gardens through a park that existed only on Wednesdays. But more than that, the map showed something else. It showed that the hidden city was bigger than the real city. That there were more impossible streets than possible ones. That the spaces between had grown so large that Chicago, the real Chicago, was now the exception, the anomaly, the small island of normal in an ocean of impossible. And at the center of my map, where all the hidden streets converged, was a place I hadn't drawn, a place that had appeared on its own, the heart of it, a building, or maybe a district, or maybe a single room that was also a universe, where all the map makers eventually went, where they became part of the map, where they drew streets from the inside, where they never left. I knew I should destroy the map, burn it, forget it, go to college, get a job, live a normal life. Instead, I rolled it up, put it in my backpack, and went looking for the heart of if. The journey took 3 days, or maybe 3 minutes, or maybe 3 years. Time works differently on the impossible streets. I walked through neighborhoods that existed only in past tense, crossed bridges that spanned nothing but connected everything, followed my own map through places I'd created and places that had created themselves. And finally, I found it, the heart of it. It was exactly what I'd expected, and nothing like I'd imagined. A building that was also a street, that was also a room, that was also a city. A place where all maps led, where all map makers ended. Inside, if inside is the right word, were the others. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Map makers from every era, still drawing, still creating, still adding streets to the invisible city. Some had been there for days, some for decades, some for so long they'd forgotten there was anywhere else. They welcomed me, showed me to a desk that had always been waiting, handed me pencils that never went dull, gave me paper that never ran out. And I drew streets that existed in multiple dimensions, neighborhoods that folded in on themselves, intersections that connected not just roads but realities. I drew for hours, days, years, until one day, and I don't know why that day, I remembered my parents, my room, my life, the real world I'd left behind. I tried to leave, to find my way back, but every exit led to another room full of map makers. Every door opened onto another impossible street. I was trapped in the heart of it, trapped in my own creation, or so I thought. Because the thing about being a map maker, the thing the old woman in Eternal Gardens hadn't told me, was that we weren't just drawing maps. We were drawing doors. Every street we created was a passageway. Every intersection was a choice. Every map was an escape route. I just had to draw my way out. So I did. Drew a map of the heart of if that showed a door that didn't exist. A door that led back to my bedroom. Back to the real world. Back to the life I'd abandoned. It took months, maybe years. The other map makers tried to stop me. Said I was breaking the rules. Said you couldn't map your way out of the center. Said once you were in the heart of it, you were part of it forever. But I kept drawing, adding details, making it real. A door, a hallway, a staircase, a path back to Chicago, the real Chicago, the limited, flat, beautiful, normal Chicago. And one day, the door appeared, just as I'd drawn it. I walked through, found myself in my childhood bedroom, exactly as I'd left it, except 20 years had passed. My parents were old, gray, had given me up for dead. The world had moved on, changed, left me behind. But I was free of the heart of it, free of the impossible streets. Except, not really, because I still had my maps, still felt the compulsion, still needed to draw streets that didn't exist. So I found a balance, a compromise. I work as a city planner now, design real streets, legal streets, streets that exist fully in this dimension. But at night, when the need becomes too strong, I still draw small maps, safe maps, streets that lead nowhere too dangerous, neighborhoods that don't trap you, intersections that always let you come home. And sometimes, when I'm walking through Chicago, I'll see an alley that shouldn't be there, a park that's not on any official map, a street sign pointing to somewhere impossible. I know other map makers put them there, others like me who can't quite let go, who need to know the hidden city still exists, that the impossible streets are still waiting. I avoid those places now, walk past without looking, pretend I don't see the pencil marks on reality, the drawn-in additions to the world. But late at night, when I'm lying in bed, I can feel them. All those streets I created, all those neighborhoods I discovered, still there, still real, still calling. The heart of it is still waiting. I know that. The desk I abandoned has my name on it. The pencils remember my hand. The paper wants my lines. Someday, maybe, I'll go back. When I'm old, when the real world has nothing left to offer, when the weight of normal streets becomes too much to bear, I'll draw one last map, the most perfect map, a map that leads exactly where I want to go. And I'll walk those impossible streets again, create new neighborhoods, design new realities, become part of the city that isn't. But not today. Today, I design normal streets, plan regular parks, create maps that anyone can follow. And if sometimes those maps have alleys that are slightly too long, or show parks that seem to shimmer at the edges, or include street names that sound like whispers, well, Old habits die hard, and the impossible streets never die at all. They just wait, hidden in the spaces between, accessible only to those who know how to draw the right lines, how to see the city that exists alongside the city, how to map the unmappable. I drew those maps once, created those streets, walked those impossible ways, and someday, God help me, I will again. The pencil is patient, the paper is willing, and the streets are eternal, waiting to be drawn, waiting to be walked, waiting to be home, forever and always, in the spaces between, in the heart of it, in the maps we make when we think we're only dreaming. Draw carefully, map wisely, and whatever you do, never draw a street you're not willing to walk, because every line becomes real, every intersection exists, every map leads somewhere, and some places, once you find them, never quite let you leave. I should know, I'm still there really, part of me, the part that draws, the part that maps, the part that knows the real city is just the beginning. The rest is waiting, in the alleys that are too long, in the parks that aren't on any map, in the streets that exist only if you know exactly how to draw them, waiting for the next map maker, the next artist of impossible geography, the next person who discovers they can draw doors to anywhere. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've noticed your maps don't quite match reality. Maybe you've drawn streets that feel too real. Maybe you've wondered why some alleys seem longer than they should be. If so, be careful, be wise, be ready. Because once you draw that first impossible street, once you step through that first unlikely door, once you discover the city that isn't, you'll never really come back. Trust me, I know, I'm still trying. 20 years later, I'm still trying. And the maps just keep drawing themselves, line by impossible line, street by hidden street, forever and always, in the spaces between, where the real city ends and the drawn city begins. The midnight caller. Sarah thought she knew her husband of 15 years, until the phone call started coming at exactly 3:17 a.m. every night. The first call came on a Tuesday. Sarah woke to the shrill ring of their landline, the old rotary phone they kept in the kitchen more for decoration than use. She glanced at the digital clock on her nightstand. 3:17 a.m. David stirred beside her but didn't wake. Sarah padded downstairs, her bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. She lifted the heavy receiver. Hello. Silence. Then very faintly she heard breathing. Slow, deliberate breaths that seemed to match her own heartbeat. Hello? Who is this? The line went dead. Sarah hung up and returned to bed. David was still sleeping soundly, his chest rising and falling in the peaceful rhythm she had grown to love over their years together. She curled up next to him and tried to forget about the strange call. The next night it happened again. Same time. 3:17 a.m. exactly. This time, Sarah didn't get up. She lay in bed listening to the phone ring 7 times before it stopped. David didn't even stir. He had always been a heavy sleeper. On Thursday night, Sarah was ready. She had moved a chair next to the kitchen phone and was sitting there at 3:15 a.m. waiting. The house was completely silent except for the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the phone rang. Sarah picked it up immediately. Hello? Sarah. The voice was barely a whisper, but she heard it clearly. A man's voice, low and gravelly. Her blood ran cold. Who is this? How do you know my name? I know everything about you, Sarah. I know you work at the library on Maple Street. I know you drive the blue Honda. I know David leaves for work at 7:30 every morning. Sarah's hand trembled as she gripped the phone. What do you want? I want you to look outside your kitchen window. Sarah's eyes darted to the window above the sink. The curtains were drawn, but she could see the faint outline of their backyard in the moonlight. No, she whispered. Look outside, Sarah. Against every instinct in her body, Sarah stood and walked to the window. She pulled back the curtain just an inch and peered out. A figure stood at the edge of their yard, just visible in the shadows near the old oak tree. Tall, wearing dark clothes, completely still, watching the house. Sarah dropped the curtain and ran upstairs, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She shook David awake. David, wake up. There's someone outside. David sat up, groggy and confused. What's wrong? Someone called. They knew my name. They told me to look outside and there's a man in our yard. David got out of bed and looked out their bedroom window, which faced the backyard. "I don't see anyone, honey. Are you sure?" Sarah pushed past him and looked out. The yard was empty. No figure by the tree. Nothing. "He was there," she insisted. "I saw him." David put his arms around her. "Maybe it was just shadows. You've been stressed about your mom's surgery. Sometimes our minds play tricks on us." But Sarah knew what she had seen. The calls continued every night, always at 3:17 a.m. Always the same gravelly voice. Sometimes he would just breathe into the phone. Sometimes he would describe what Sarah had worn that day, where she had gone, what she had eaten for lunch. It was as if he was watching her constantly. Sarah begged David to change their phone number, but he insisted they should call the police first. When Officer Martinez came to take their statement, he was sympathetic but not particularly helpful. "Prank calls are hard to trace," he explained, "especially if they're only lasting a few minutes. We can put in a request to monitor your line, but it takes time to set up." "What am I supposed to do until then?" Sarah asked. "Document everything. Write down exactly what he says and when he calls. And maybe consider staying somewhere else for a few nights." But Sarah didn't want to leave her home. She had lived in this house since she was a child. Her parents had left it to her when they passed away 5 years ago. This was her sanctuary, and she wasn't going to let some stranger drive her out. That night, Sarah decided to try a different approach. When the phone rang at 3:17 a.m., she answered it immediately. "What do you want from me?" she demanded. The voice chuckled, a sound like gravel being poured into a bucket. "I want you to remember, Sarah." "Remember what?" "You know what you did." "I don't know what you're talking about." "October 15th, 3 years ago. You remember now, don't you?" Sarah's mind raced. October 15th, 3 years ago. That was the night of the accident. She had been driving home from her book club meeting. It was raining and the roads were slick. She had come around the bend on Hillcrest Road too fast and lost control of her car. She had skidded off the road and hit something. In the darkness and confusion, she hadn't been sure what it was. A deer, she had thought, or maybe just a tree branch. She had gotten out of the car to check, but it was so dark and the rain was coming down so hard. She couldn't see any damage to her car and she didn't see any animal. So she had driven home and never mentioned it to anyone. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied. "Room 237 at Mercy General Hospital. He's been there for 3 years, Sarah. 3 years in a coma because of you." The line went dead. Sarah sat in the kitchen chair, her whole body shaking. Room 237. She knew that room number. She had seen it on her visits to see her mother after her surgery. It was in the long-term care ward. The next morning, Sarah called in sick to work. She drove to Mercy General Hospital and took the elevator to the second floor. The long-term care ward was quiet, with only the soft beeping of machines and the occasional voice of a nurse in the hallway. Sarah walked slowly down the corridor until she found room 237. The door was slightly open. She peered inside. A man lay in the hospital bed, connected to various machines. He was probably in his 40s, with graying hair and a stubbled face. His eyes were closed, and he looked peaceful despite the tubes and wires surrounding him. A small placard at the foot of the bed read, "James Morrison. Admit date, October 15th, 2021. Sarah's legs nearly gave out. She grabbed the door frame to steady herself. This man had been here for 3 years. 3 years since the night she had skidded off Hillcrest Road. "Can I help you?" Sarah spun around. A nurse was standing behind her, a kind-faced woman with gray hair. I was just... Sarah couldn't form the words. "Are you family?" the nurse asked gently. "No, I think I might know him." "What happened to him?" The nurse looked sad. "Hit and run. Someone found him on Hillcrest Road in the middle of the night. He'd been walking home from work when a car hit him and left him there. Poor man has been in a coma ever since. No family, no visitors. It's heartbreaking." Sarah felt like she was going to be sick. Has he ever shown any signs of waking up?" "Not really. Though sometimes the night nurses say they hear him mumbling. Words that don't make much sense. Names mostly." "Names?" "Sarah, I think. He says, Sarah, sometimes." Sarah ran from the hospital. She drove home with tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. She had hit a person, a human being, and she had left him there to die. But how could he know? How could he be calling her if he was in a coma? That night, Sarah didn't wait for the phone to ring. At 3:15 a.m., she was sitting by the kitchen phone. When it rang at exactly 3:17 a.m., she picked it up immediately. James? You remember now. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought I hit a deer or something. It was so dark in the rain. You left me there to die. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was a person. I would never, if I had known. But you do know now. And you haven't told anyone. You haven't come forward. You're still lying. Sarah was sobbing now. What do you want me to do? I want justice, Sarah. I want my life back. I want to walk again. I want to go home to my apartment and feed my cat and read the newspaper in the morning. But I can't do any of those things because of you. I'll turn myself in. I'll tell the police everything. It's too late for that now, Sarah. 3 years too late. Then what? What do you want from me? There was a long pause. Sarah could hear that same slow, deliberate breathing. I want you to come to the hospital tonight. Room 237. Come alone. I can't. I can't face you. You will come, Sarah. Because if you don't, I'll call David next. I'll tell him what you did. I'll tell him how his wife is a coward and a liar who left an innocent man to die on the side of the road. The line went dead. Sarah sat in the dark kitchen, her mind racing. She thought about waking David and telling him everything. But how could she explain 3 years of lies? How could she make him understand that she truly hadn't known she had hit a person? At 2:30 a.m., Sarah got dressed and drove to the hospital. The night security guard barely looked up as she signed in. She knew the layout now, and she made her way to the second floor without difficulty. The long-term care ward was even quieter at night. Most of the rooms were dark, with only the soft glow of monitors and the occasional flash of a nurse's penlight in the distance. Room 237 was at the end of the hall. Sarah walked slowly toward it, her footsteps echoing softly on the linoleum floor. The door was closed now, but she could see light underneath it. Sarah pushed the door open and stepped inside. James Morrison was exactly as she had seen him before. Lying peacefully in his hospital bed, eyes closed, breathing with the help of a ventilator. The machines around him beeped steadily. Sarah approached the bed cautiously. James? I'm here. I came like you asked. James didn't move. His eyes remained closed. I'm so sorry, Sarah whispered. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am truly, deeply sorry. I would give anything to take back that night. Still no response. Sarah watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of consciousness, any indication that he was aware of her presence. Nothing. Sarah pulled a chair up next to the bed and sat down. I don't understand how you've been calling me. The doctor said you're in a coma. But somehow you know things. You know my name, where I live, what I did. She reached out tentatively and touched his hand. It was warm but completely limp. Maybe I'm losing my mind, she continued. Maybe the guilt has finally driven me crazy and I'm imagining all of this. But if you can hear me, if you're somehow aware, I want you to know that I will make this right. I'll turn myself in. I'll take responsibility for what I did. Sarah sat with James for nearly an hour, talking to him, apologizing, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Finally, she stood to leave. As she reached for the door handle, she heard something behind her. A soft sound like a whisper. She turned around. James was exactly as before. Eyes closed, breathing steadily with the ventilator. But the sound came again. Definitely a whisper. Sarah moved closer to the bed. James? Are you trying to say something? She leaned down, putting her ear close to his lips. The whisper came again, so faint she could barely make it out. Not James? Sarah jerked back. What did you say? The whisper came once more, slightly clearer this time. Not James Morrison. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She looked at the placard at the foot of the bed again. James Morrison. But if this wasn't James Morrison, then who was it? She ran to the nurse's station. The night nurse looked up from her paperwork with surprise. Excuse me, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. The patient in room 237. James Morrison. How long has he been there? The nurse looked confused. Room 237? That room's been empty for 2 weeks. We moved Mr. Morrison to room 244 after his condition improved. Sarah felt the world spinning around her. Empty? But there's someone in that bed. The nurse stood up looking concerned. "Ma'am, are you feeling all right? Room 237 has been empty since we transferred Mr. Morrison. We're waiting for maintenance to fix the ventilator before we can admit another patient." Sarah ran back to room 237. She threw open the door. The room was empty. The bed was stripped with just a bare mattress. The machines were unplugged and pushed against the wall. There was no one there. Sarah sank to her knees in the doorway. She was losing her mind. The guilt over the accident had finally broken her, and she was hallucinating everything. The phone calls, the man in the bed, all of it. She drove home in a daze. David was still sleeping soundly when she slipped back into bed. She lay there staring at the ceiling until dawn, trying to make sense of what was happening to her. The next night, the phone didn't ring at 3:17 a.m. Sarah sat in the kitchen waiting, but the house remained silent. She began to hope that maybe the hallucinations were over, that whatever breakdown she had been having was finally ending. But at 7:30 a.m., just as David was leaving for work, the phone rang. David answered it. "Hello? What? Who is this?" "No, that's impossible." Sarah watched her husband's face turn pale. He looked at her with an expression she had never seen before. Fear mixed with confusion and something else. Disgust. "Who was that?" Sarah asked, though she already knew. "Someone claiming to be James Morrison. He said you hit him with your car 3 years ago and left him to die." Sarah's heart sank. "David, I can explain. He said you've been visiting him in the hospital. He said you confessed everything to him last night. It's not what you think. I mean, it is, but I didn't know. I didn't know I hit a person." David stared at her. "Are you telling me this is true? You hit someone with your car and never told me?" "I thought it was a deer. It was dark and raining and I lost control of the car. I got out to check, but I couldn't see anything. I swear I thought it was just an animal." "And you never thought to call the police? Never thought to make sure?" "I was scared. And then when I got home and there was no damage to the car, I convinced myself it was nothing." David picked up his briefcase and headed for the door. "I can't. I need some time to think about this." "David, wait. Please. Let me explain everything." But David was already gone, the door slamming behind him. Sarah spent the day in a fog of anxiety and guilt. She called David's office several times, but his assistant said he was in meetings. She knew he was avoiding her. That evening, David came home very late. He barely looked at Sarah as he heated up some leftovers for dinner. "Did you verify the story?" Sarah asked quietly. David nodded. "I called the hospital. There is a James Morrison in long-term care. Hit and run victim from 3 years ago. Still in a coma." "David, I know how this looks, but you have to believe me. I never meant for this to happen." David looked at her with tired eyes. "The thing is, Sarah, I might have been able to understand the accident, even leaving the scene, if you truly didn't know what you had hit. But it's been 3 years. 3 years of lies. And apparently you've been visiting him in the hospital and never thought to tell me about any of this. I only went to see him twice. And I don't understand how he's been calling me if he's in a coma. Something strange is happening, David. I think I might be having some kind of breakdown." The man I spoke to on the phone didn't sound like he was in a coma. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What did he sound like? Awake, alert, angry. David pushed his food around on his plate. "He wants to meet with both of us tomorrow night. At the hospital. Both of us. He says he wants to see the woman who destroyed his life and the husband who's been living with a liar." Sarah wanted to protest, to insist that something supernatural was happening, that James Morrison couldn't possibly be making these phone calls. But she had no proof, and even she was beginning to doubt her own sanity. The next evening, Sarah and David drove to the hospital in silence. Sarah's hands were shaking as they walked through the lobby and took the elevator to the second floor. The long-term care ward looked different tonight. More crowded, with several nurses moving between rooms. Sarah and David made their way to room 244, where the nurse had said James Morrison had been moved. They knocked on the door and heard a voice say, "Come in." Sarah's heart nearly stopped. She recognized the voice. It was the same gravelly whisper that had been calling her every night. They entered the room and Sarah saw him immediately. James Morrison was sitting up in bed, very much awake and alert. He was thinner than she remembered from her hallucination, with deeper lines around his eyes, but he was unmistakably conscious. "Sarah," he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered from the phone calls. Thank you for coming. Sarah could barely speak. You're awake. I woke up 2 weeks ago. Quite suddenly, actually. The doctors called it a miracle. James looked directly at her with sharp, intelligent eyes. But I remember everything, Sarah. Every moment from that night. And I remember the dreams I had while I was unconscious. Dreams about finding the person who hit me. David stepped forward. Mr. Morrison, I want you to know that my wife told me what happened. We're prepared to take full responsibility. James nodded slowly. I appreciate that. But I'm afraid it's not quite that simple. What do you mean? Sarah asked. You see, Sarah, during those 3 years in the coma, I had a lot of time to think. Time to plan. And I realized something important. Simply turning you in to the police wouldn't give me back the 3 years of my life that you stole from me. Sarah felt David's hand tighten around hers. What do you want? David asked. James smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. I want Sarah to understand what it feels like to lose everything. Her freedom, her husband, her comfortable life. I want her to experience the helplessness I felt lying on that road in the rain, waiting for someone to save me. The police, David started. Won't find any evidence, James interrupted. You see, I've had 3 years to plan this very carefully. By the time you leave this hospital tonight, Sarah, your life as you know it will be over. Sarah's mind raced. What are you talking about? James reached for the phone beside his bed. I'm calling the police now to report the hit and run. But I'm also going to tell them about your visits to the hospital, how you confessed everything to me, and how you and your husband tried to bribe me to keep quiet. That's not true, David protested. Of course it's not. But it will be your word against mine. And I'm the victim here, remember? The innocent man who spent 3 years in a coma while his attacker walked free. James began dialing. I wonder how long you'll get for hit and run, fleeing the scene, obstruction of justice, and attempted bribery? Sarah realized with growing horror that James had been planning this confrontation all along. The phone calls, the strange encounters at the hospital, everything had been designed to manipulate her into this exact moment. Wait, she said. Please. There has to be another way. James paused with his finger over the phone. Actually, Sarah, there is. What? I want you to confess everything publicly. I want you to call the local newspaper and tell them your story. I want you to face the same humiliation and judgment that I faced lying in that hospital bed while people whispered about the poor man with no family, no visitors. Sarah looked at David, who nodded slowly. If that's what it takes, she said, I'll do it. And I want compensation. Not money, but something more valuable. I want your house. Our house. The house you've been living in comfortably for 3 years while I was fighting for my life. I want you to sign it over to me. Consider it payment for my pain and suffering. David stepped forward. That house belonged to Sarah's family. It's been in her family for generations. And now it will be mine. Unless, of course, you'd prefer I call the police and let the courts decide how much you owe me. Sarah felt trapped. Everything James was asking for would destroy the life she had built, but she couldn't argue with his logic. She had taken 3 years of his life. Why shouldn't she give up the things that mattered most to her? I need time to think, she said. You have until tomorrow morning. I'll expect your decision by 9 a.m. If I don't hear from you by then, I'm calling the police. Sarah and David left the hospital in stunned silence. They drove home without speaking, each lost in their own thoughts. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about James Morrison's words, about the 3 years he had lost, about the life she had stolen from him. She had caused immeasurable harm, and now she had to face the consequences. At 3:17 a.m., the phone rang. Sarah answered it immediately. James? But the voice that came through the phone was different, softer, more confused. Sarah? Who is James? My name is Robert. Robert Chin. Sarah's blood ran cold. Who is this? I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I think you hit me with your car. That's impossible. I only hit one person. James Morrison. No, Sarah. You hit me on Elm Street 2 months ago. I was crossing the street after my night shift at the diner. You were texting on your phone and you ran the red light. Sarah's mind reeled. No, that's not. I don't text while driving. And 2 months ago? I would remember that. You left me there, Sarah. Just like you left the others. Others? What others? Michael Patterson. You hit him with your car outside the grocery store last month. And Lisa Weber. You hit her just last week when she was walking her dog. Sarah was shaking now. That's not true. I only had one accident. 3 years ago. Look outside your window, Sarah. Sarah looked out the kitchen window. In the backyard, she could see figures standing by the old oak tree. Not just one figure this time, but several. They were all watching the house. We're all here, Sarah. All of us waiting for justice. The line went dead. Sarah ran upstairs and shook David awake. David, there are people in our yard. Multiple people. David got up and looked out the window. Sarah, there's no one there. Sarah looked over his shoulder. The yard was empty. They were there. I saw them. David put his hands on her shoulders. Honey, I think you're having a breakdown. The stress of everything with James Morrison. Maybe you should see someone. A doctor or a therapist. But Sarah knew what she had seen. And she was beginning to understand that her troubles were far from over. Over the next few hours, the phone rang repeatedly. Each time, it was a different voice claiming to be someone she had hit with her car. Robert Chin from 2 months ago. Michael Patterson from last month. Lisa Weber from last week. Each one described accidents that Sarah couldn't remember, times and places where she couldn't possibly have been. By morning, Sarah was exhausted and terrified. She had experienced some kind of psychological break, and she was no longer sure what was real and what was a product of her guilt-ridden mind. At 9 a.m. exactly, the phone rang again. This time it was James Morrison. Have you made your decision, Sarah? James, I need to ask you something. Are there other people? Other accidents? There was a pause. What are you talking about? People have been calling me all night, claiming I hit them with my car at different times. Robert Chin, Michael Patterson, Lisa Weber. James was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, that same gravelly sound she had heard so many times before. Oh, Sarah, I think your guilt is finally catching up with you. Those people don't exist. You're imagining them. But they knew details. They knew my name, where I live. Because they're all in your head. Your subconscious mind is creating new victims because you can't handle the guilt of what you did to me. Sarah felt a wave of relief mixed with horror. She was having a complete psychological breakdown, but at least she hadn't hurt multiple people. So you'll help me? She asked. You'll help me get through this. I'll help you, Sarah. But first, you need to make things right. You need to confess publicly and sign over your house. Once you've paid for what you did to me, maybe your mind will finally be at peace. Sarah looked at David, who had been listening to the conversation. He nodded encouragingly. Okay, Sarah said. I'll do it. I'll call the newspaper and I'll sign over the house. Good. I'll have the papers drawn up today. You can sign them when you meet me at the hospital tonight. After Sarah hung up, she called the local newspaper and arranged to meet with a reporter that afternoon. She spent an hour telling the whole story, from the rainy night 3 years ago to her recent psychological breakdown. The reporter was sympathetic but thorough, asking detailed questions about the accident and Sarah's failure to report it. That evening, Sarah and David returned to the hospital with a heavy heart. Sarah had spent the day saying goodbye to the house where she had grown up, packing a few personal items and preparing to start over somewhere new. When they arrived at James Morrison's room, he was sitting up in bed with a stack of legal documents on his bedside table. I'm impressed, Sarah. I saw the article online. You were very honest about everything. Sarah nodded. I just want to make this right. Sign here, James said, pointing to several places in the documents. This transfers ownership of your house to me, along with all furnishings and personal property. Sarah signed without reading the papers carefully. She just wanted it to be over. There's one more thing, James said after she had signed everything. I want you to visit me here every week. I want you to look at what you did to me and remember the consequences of your actions. Of course, Sarah agreed. Whatever you need. James smiled. Good. I think we're going to get along just fine, Sarah. As they prepared to leave, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace. She had finally taken responsibility for her actions, and hopefully now the psychological torment would end. But as they walked toward the elevator, Sarah heard James call out behind them. Oh, and Sarah? Give my regards to Robert, Michael, and Lisa when you see them. Sarah turned around, confused. What did you say? But James's door was already closing, and a nurse was walking toward them. Excuse me, Sarah said to the nurse. The patient in room 244. How long has he been awake? The nurse looked puzzled. Room 244? That's been empty for months. We don't have any patients in that room right now. Sarah felt the familiar chill run down her spine. But we just talked to James Morrison. He's been in that room for 2 weeks. I'm sorry, but there's no James Morrison in this ward. There never has been. Sarah and David exchanged terrified looks. They ran back to room 244 and threw open the door. The room was empty. Not just empty of people, but completely stripped. No bed, no machines, no furniture. Just bare walls and a window overlooking the parking lot. Sarah sank to her knees in the empty room. What's happening to me? David knelt beside her. I don't know, honey, but we're going to figure this out. As they sat there trying to make sense of everything, Sarah's phone rang. She looked at the caller ID. It was their home number. She answered it with shaking hands. Hello. Welcome home, Sarah. It was James Morrison's voice calling from inside their house. Sarah and David drove home as fast as they could. When they pulled into their driveway, all the lights in the house were on. The front door was standing wide open. They cautiously entered their home. Everything looked normal, but there was something different about the atmosphere. It felt colder, more oppressive. James? Sarah called out. Are you here? No answer. They searched every room in the house but found no one. However, in the kitchen they found a note on the table. Thank you for the house, Sarah. I'll take good care of it. Don't worry about visiting me at the hospital anymore. I'll be much closer than that. Jam. Sarah crumpled the note in her hand. This can't be happening. None of this makes sense. David put his arm around her. We need to call the police. Something is seriously wrong here. But before David could reach for the phone, it rang. Sarah answered it. Miss me already? James Morrison's voice was clearer now, as if he was calling from inside the house. Where are you? Sarah demanded. I'm everywhere, Sarah. I'm in every room, every shadow, every guilty thought in your head. You can't escape what you did, and you can't escape me. What do you want from me? I gave you everything. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You took my life away from me, and now I'm going to do the same to you. Every day, every night, I'll be here to remind you of what you did. The line went dead. Sarah and David spent that night in a hotel, but even there, the phone calls continued. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the hotel phone rang. It was James Morrison, somehow knowing exactly where they were. Over the following weeks, Sarah's life became a nightmare. No matter where she went, James Morrison found her. He called her at work, at friends' houses, even on her cell phone with numbers he shouldn't have been able to access. Sarah visited the hospital repeatedly, trying to find proof that James Morrison existed, but every time she was told that no such patient had ever been admitted. The reporters who had written about her story found no record of a hit-and-run victim named James Morrison from 3 years ago. Slowly, Sarah began to realize the horrifying truth. James Morrison wasn't real. He had never been real. Her guilt over that night 3 years ago had created him in her mind, and now he had taken on a life of his own. The accident had really happened. Sarah had hit something that night on Hillcrest Road, but it hadn't been a person. It had been a deer, just as she had originally thought. Her car had indeed been undamaged, and there had been no victim. But her guilt over leaving the scene, combined with years of anxiety and stress, had created an elaborate delusion. James Morrison was a figment of her imagination, born from her own conscience and fed by her overwhelming sense of responsibility. The phone calls were real, but they were coming from Sarah herself. In her dissociative episodes, she was calling her own house and having conversations with her imagined victim. The legal documents transferring her house had been signed, but they had been prepared by Sarah in one of her fugue states and had no legal validity. The hospital visits, the encounters with James Morrison, even the conversations with David, much of it had been elaborate hallucinations created by Sarah's fractured psyche. With the help of a psychiatrist, Sarah slowly began to understand what had happened to her. The guilt over a minor traffic incident had grown and festered over 3 years until it consumed her entirely, creating a complex delusion that nearly destroyed her life. The treatment was long and difficult. Sarah had to learn to forgive herself for a crime she had never actually committed, and to distinguish between her real memories and the elaborate fantasy her mind had created. David stood by her throughout the recovery process, and gradually their relationship healed. They returned to their house, which had never actually been transferred to anyone else, and Sarah slowly began to reclaim her life. The phone calls stopped. The hallucinations faded. James Morrison, the man who had never existed, finally disappeared from Sarah's life. But sometimes, late at night, Sarah would still wake at exactly 3:17 a.m. and listen for the phone to ring. And in those quiet moments, she wondered if James Morrison had been real after all, and if somewhere out there he was still waiting for justice. The guilt, Sarah learned, never completely goes away. But with time and help, it becomes manageable. And sometimes that's the best you can hope for. The Watcher in the Woods. Emma had always felt safe in the small town of Millbrook, until she realized someone had been watching her every move for the past 6 months. It started with small things. A coffee cup moved from where she had left it on her kitchen counter. A book turned face down when she was certain she had left it open to page 43. Her bedroom window cracked open an inch when she distinctly remembered closing it before leaving for work. Emma lived alone in a small cottage on the outskirts of Millbrook, surrounded by dense pine woods that stretched for miles in every direction. She had moved there 2 years ago after her divorce, seeking the peace and solitude that only a rural setting could provide. The cottage was perfect for her needs, cozy, affordable, and far enough from town that she could enjoy complete privacy. At first, Emma dismissed the small disturbances as products of her own absent-mindedness. She had been under a lot of stress lately with her new job at the local elementary school, and it made sense that she might be forgetting where she placed things or whether she had closed a window properly. But the incidents kept happening, and they were getting more noticeable. One morning in late September, Emma woke to find her front door standing wide open. The cool autumn air had filled her house overnight, and leaves had blown across her hardwood floors. Emma was certain she had locked the door before going to bed. She always locked the door. It was one of those habits she had developed living alone. She called the local police department, and Officer Collins came out to take a report. He was a kind man in his 50s who had known Emma since she moved to town. "Any signs of forced entry?" he asked, examining her door frame carefully. "I don't think so. The lock still works fine and nothing seems to be missing." Officer Collins walked around the perimeter of her property, checking for footprints or other evidence of an intruder. He found nothing unusual. "Could be the wind," he suggested. "These old doors sometimes don't catch properly if they're not closed firmly." Emma wanted to believe him, but she knew she had locked that door. She had turned the deadbolt and checked it twice, the way she did every single night. "I'll ask the patrol car to swing by your place a few extra times over the next week," Officer Collins promised. "Just to be safe." The extra patrols made Emma feel slightly better, but the strange incidents continued. Her mailbox would be left open after the postal delivery, even though the mailman always closed it. Her garden hose would be uncoiled and stretched across her yard when she came home from work, though she kept it neatly wound on its hook by the back door. Most unsettling of all were the photographs. Emma had always been passionate about photography. She kept several photo albums on her coffee table, filled with pictures from her travels, family gatherings, and nature shots she had taken around Millbrook. One evening, she noticed that someone had been looking through them. The albums were still stacked neatly on the table, but they were in a different order than she had left them. And when she opened the top album, she found a photograph that didn't belong to her. It was a picture of her own house, taken from the woods behind her property. The photo showed her cottage in the late afternoon light, with her car parked in the driveway and what appeared to be Emma herself visible through her kitchen window. Emma's hands shook as she held the photograph. Someone had been watching her house. Someone had been close enough to take a clear picture through her window. And somehow, that person had gotten into her house to leave the photo for her to find. She called Officer Collins immediately. "I'll be right over," he said when she described the photograph. This time, Officer Collins took the situation much more seriously. He dusted the photo album for fingerprints and bagged the mysterious photograph as evidence. He also arranged for a more thorough search of Emma's property. "We found some footprints in the woods behind your house," he reported after the search was complete. "Boot prints, size 11 or 12. They lead to a spot about 50 yards back where someone might have been watching your house with binoculars or a camera." Emma felt sick to her stomach. "How long do you think they've been watching me?" "Hard to say. The prints could be fairly recent, but the ground is soft back there, so they might not last long anyway." Officer Collins arranged for increased patrols and gave Emma his direct phone number. Call me immediately if you notice anything else unusual. And Emma, I think you should consider staying with a friend for a few days, just until we figure out what's going on. But Emma didn't want to be driven from her home. She had worked hard to build a life in Millbrook, and she wasn't going to let some stalker scare her away. Instead, she took precautions. She had new locks installed on all her doors and windows. She bought a security system with motion sensors and cameras. She even adopted a dog from the local animal shelter, a German Shepherd mix named Max, who was alert and protective. For a few weeks, the security measures seemed to work. There were no more mysterious incidents, no more signs that someone had been in her house. Emma began to relax, thinking that perhaps the police investigation had scared off whoever had been watching her. Then the letters started arriving. The first one appeared in her mailbox on a Tuesday morning. It was addressed to Emma in neat handwriting with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message written in the same careful script. I enjoy watching you in the evenings when you read by the window. You look so peaceful and content. I hope you don't mind the company. Emma immediately called Officer Collins, who came to collect the letter as evidence. He also had a discussion with the mail carrier, but the postal worker insisted he had not delivered any letter without a return address. Someone must have put it directly in your mailbox, Officer Collins concluded, which means they were here on your property. The security cameras hadn't captured anyone approaching the mailbox, which was strange. Emma reviewed the footage herself, but saw nothing unusual. Just the mail truck arriving and departing, and later herself checking the mail and finding the letter. The second letter arrived 3 days later. I saw you playing with your new dog in the backyard yesterday. You have such a beautiful smile. I wish I could make you smile like that. This time Emma was ready. She had been checking her security camera footage obsessively, and she caught something. Around 3 a.m., the motion sensor by her mailbox had triggered, but the camera showed nothing but an empty driveway and mailbox. Emma called the security company to report the malfunction, but when the technician arrived, he found nothing wrong with the system. Camera's working perfectly, he assured her. Motion sensor too. If something triggered it, it should have recorded whatever was there. Emma began to wonder if she was dealing with someone who knew exactly how to avoid detection. Someone who understood her security system and knew how to work around it. The third letter was longer and more personal. Dear Emma, I know you're frightened, and I'm sorry for that. I never meant to scare you. I just wanted to be close to you. You're so different from other people in this town. You're intelligent and kind and beautiful. I've been watching you for months now, and I think I'm falling in love with you. I know this might seem strange, but I feel like I know you better than anyone else ever has. I know that you drink tea instead of coffee on Sunday mornings. I know that you sing softly to yourself when you're cooking dinner. I know that you sometimes cry when you're watching sad movies, and that you talk to your dog like he's a person. These little things make you who you are, and I treasure every moment I get to observe them. Please don't be afraid of me. I would never hurt you. I just want to be part of your life. Emma felt violated in a way she had never experienced before. This person had been watching her most private moments, cataloging her habits and behaviors like a scientist studying a specimen. The intimate details in the letter proved that he had been much closer to her house than the police had suspected. Officer Collins read the letter with a grim expression. This is escalating. He's becoming more bold, more personal. I think it's time to consider that safe house option we discussed. But Emma was tired of being afraid. No, I want to catch him. If he's been watching me for months, then he has a routine, a pattern. There has to be a way to turn the tables on him. Emma, this person could be dangerous. He says he doesn't want to hurt me. They always say that, right up until they do. Against Officer Collins' advice, Emma decided to set a trap. She would pretend to go away for the weekend, but actually hide in her house and watch for her stalker to make his move. On Friday evening, Emma made a big show of packing her car and loading it with suitcases. She called her sister loudly on the phone, making sure to mention that she would be staying in the city for the weekend. Then she drove away, but only as far as the nearest gas station, where Officer Collins was waiting for her. Emma got into the police car, and Officer Collins drove her back to her house using a route that avoided the main road. They parked behind the garage, where Emma's car couldn't be seen from the woods. Emma spent Friday night and all day Saturday hidden in her basement, watching her security monitors and waiting for her stalker to appear. Max stayed with her, alert and ready. On Saturday evening, just as the sun was setting, Emma finally saw him. A figure emerged from the tree line behind her house. He was tall and wore dark clothing that made him difficult to see in the fading light. He moved carefully across her backyard, staying close to the shadows. Emma's heart pounded as she watched him approach her back door. He seemed to know exactly where the security cameras were positioned, because he managed to avoid being seen by most of them. Only one camera, positioned to monitor the back porch, caught a clear view of him. Emma picked up her phone to call Officer Collins, but then she hesitated. The figure was doing something strange. Instead of trying to break into her house, he was placing something on her back porch. A small package or envelope. Emma watched as the figure retreated back into the woods, moving just as carefully as he had approached. Within minutes, he had disappeared entirely. Emma waited another hour before emerging from the basement. She found Officer Collins' number and called him while approaching her back door. He was here. He left something on my porch. Don't touch it, Officer Collins warned. I'm on my way. When Officer Collins arrived, they approached the back porch together. The package was small and wrapped in brown paper, with Emma's name written on the outside. Officer Collins carefully opened it while wearing gloves. Inside was another letter and a small jewelry box. The letter read, "I know you're not really away for the weekend. I saw the police car behind your garage, but that's okay. I understand that you're scared and that you needed to take precautions. I want you to have this ring. It belonged to my grandmother. She wore it every day for 50 years of marriage. I think she would want you to have it. I hope someday you'll wear it and think of me. I'll keep watching over you until you're ready to meet me properly. All my love, Thomas." Inside the jewelry box was a beautiful antique ring with a small diamond surrounded by sapphires. "Thomas," Officer Collins muttered. "At least now we have a name." Emma stared at the ring. It was genuinely beautiful and clearly valuable. But the thought of wearing something given to her by her stalker made her skin crawl. "We need to find out who this Thomas is," she said. Officer Collins nodded. "I'll run the name through our database and see what comes up. In the meantime, I really think you should consider staying somewhere else. This guy is getting bolder." But Emma had an idea. "What if I don't? What if I give him what he wants?" "What do you mean?" "He wants to meet me properly. What if I agree to meet him, but on my terms? In a public place with you nearby?" Officer Collins looked skeptical. "That could be very dangerous, Emma. It could also be the only way to end this. He's been watching me for months. He knows my routines, my habits, everything about my daily life. I can't live like this forever." After much discussion, they decided to try Emma's plan. Emma would write a letter to Thomas, agreeing to meet him at the Millbrook Diner on Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. She would leave the letter in her mailbox, where he was sure to find it. The letter was simple. "Thomas, I received your gift and your letters. I appreciate that you don't want to frighten me. If you truly want to meet me properly, I'll be at the Millbrook Diner on Wednesday at 2 p.m. I'll be sitting in the booth by the front window wearing a blue sweater. Please come alone, and please understand that I'm still nervous about this situation." Emma left the letter in her mailbox on Monday morning. By Monday evening it was gone. On Tuesday, another letter appeared in its place. "Dear Emma, thank you for agreeing to meet me. I'm so excited that I can barely contain myself. I promise I'll come alone, and I promise I won't do anything to make you uncomfortable. I just want to talk to you face to face. I think you'll find that I'm not the monster you might think I am. I'm just a man who has fallen in love with an extraordinary woman. Until tomorrow, Thomas." Wednesday afternoon, Emma sat in the designated booth at the Millbrook Diner, wearing her blue sweater and trying to calm her nerves. Officer Collins was seated at the counter, pretending to read a newspaper but actually watching everyone who entered the restaurant. At exactly 2 p.m., a man walked through the door. He was tall and thin, probably in his early 40s, with graying hair and kind eyes. He looked around the diner nervously until he spotted Emma, then approached her booth with hesitant steps. "Emma?" he said softly. Emma nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. The man slid into the booth across from her. "Thank you for meeting me. I know this must be very strange for you. You're Thomas?" "Yes, Thomas Brennan." He seemed normal, even pleasant. Nothing like the dangerous stalker Emma had imagined. "Why have you been watching me?" Emma managed to ask. Thomas looked down at his hands. "I know how it must seem to you. Creepy and invasive. But it didn't start out that way." "How did it start?" I work for the Forestry Service. My job is to monitor the health of the woods around Millbrook, check for signs of disease or insect damage, that sort of thing. Your house sits right at the edge of the forest preserve, so I've been working in that area for the past year. Emma frowned. You were watching me because of your job? At first, it was just accidental. I would be working in the woods behind your house, and I'd see you in your garden or through your window. You seemed so peaceful and content. It was calming to watch you go about your daily routine. So you started watching me on purpose? Thomas nodded, looking ashamed. I told myself it was harmless. I wasn't hurting anyone, and you didn't even know I was there. But over time, I became fascinated by you. You're so different from anyone I've ever known. Different how? You're gentle with everything around you. I've watched you rescue spiders from your bathtub and carry them outside. You leave food out for the stray cats in the neighborhood. When your neighbor's dog got loose, you spent 2 hours helping them look for it. You're just kind. Genuinely kind. Emma felt her anger beginning to soften, but she forced herself to stay focused. That doesn't give you the right to invade my privacy. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. I know I crossed a line, and I know I frightened you. That was never my intention. Then why didn't you just introduce yourself normally? Why all the letters and the photographs? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Because I was afraid you'd reject me. I'm not good with people, Emma. I spend most of my time alone in the woods. I don't know how to talk to women, especially someone as beautiful and intelligent as you. So you thought stalking me would be better? I thought if you got to know me gradually, through the letters, you might be more open to meeting me. I realize now how wrong I was. Emma studied Thomas's face. He seemed genuinely remorseful, and there was something vulnerable about his expression that made her think he was telling the truth. The things you wrote in your letters, she said, about watching me through my windows, knowing my personal habits. That felt very invasive. I know, and I'm sorry. I should have stopped long before it got to that point. Emma glanced over at Officer Collins, who was still watching from the counter. Thomas, what you've been doing is called stalking. It's a crime. The police could arrest you. Thomas paled. I never thought of it that way. I thought I was getting to know you by spying on me without my consent. Yes, you're right. I see that now. Thomas looked directly at Emma. What can I do to make this right? Emma considered the question. Thomas seemed sincere in his remorse, and she didn't get the sense that he was dangerous. Misguided, perhaps, and certainly inappropriate in his methods, but not threatening. You can start by promising never to watch me again without my permission. No more lurking in the woods behind my house. No more going through my things or leaving me gifts. I promise. And you can answer some questions for me honestly. Of course. How did you get into my house? My doors were locked. Thomas looked uncomfortable. I have a key. What? How do you have a key to my house? When you first moved in 2 years ago, you had some work done on your cottage. New plumbing, electrical updates. I was working in the woods at the time, and I saw the contractors leaving a spare key under your flower pot for each other. Emma remembered the renovations. She had indeed left a spare key for the various workers. I took the key, Thomas continued. I told myself it was for safety reasons in case you ever had an emergency and couldn't get help. But really, I wanted to be able to get close to you. You've been inside my house multiple times. Yes, but I never took anything or damaged anything. I just wanted to see how you lived, to understand you better. Emma felt another wave of violation. Thomas, that's breaking and entering. That's a serious crime. I know, and I'll give you the key right now. Thomas reached into his pocket and placed a house key on the table between them. I should never have taken it. Emma picked up the key, recognizing it as one of her original house keys. What else? What other boundaries have you crossed? Thomas was quiet for a moment, then said, I've been reading your mail. My personal mail? Not taking it. Just reading it when you leave it on your kitchen counter. I wanted to know more about your life, your family, your interests. Emma felt sick. Thomas, do you understand how wrong all of this is? How completely inappropriate? I do now. I really do. I got so caught up in my feelings for you that I lost sight of right and wrong. Emma looked at this man who had turned her life upside down for the past several months. He seemed genuinely contrite, but the damage was done. She would never feel safe in her own home again, knowing that someone had been watching her most private moments. I need you to stay away from me, she said firmly. Completely away. No more watching, no more letters, no more contact of any kind. I understand. And I think you should get some help. Talk to a counselor or therapist about why you thought this behavior was acceptable. Thomas nodded. You're right. I will. Emma stood up to leave, but Thomas spoke again. Emma, wait. There's something else I need to tell you. Emma sat back down reluctantly. I'm not the only one who's been watching you. Emma's blood ran cold. What do you mean? In the past few weeks, I've noticed someone else in the woods. Someone who doesn't belong there. At first I thought it might be another forestry worker, but I checked with my supervisor. No one else is assigned to that area. Another watcher? I think so. And whoever it is, they're much more careful than I was. More professional. I've only caught glimpses of them, but I get the feeling they've been observing both of us. Emma felt the world spinning around her. Are you saying there are two stalkers? I don't know what to call them. But yes, I think someone else has been watching your house. Someone who knows how to stay hidden much better than I do. Emma immediately signaled to Officer Collins, who came over to their booth. Officer Collins, this is Thomas Brennan. Thomas, this is Officer Collins with the Millbrook Police. Officer Collins sat down next to Emma. Mr. Brennan, I understand you've been stalking Ms. Williams. Thomas looked miserable. Yes, sir. And I'm deeply sorry for my actions. We'll deal with that in a moment. But first, I understand you have information about a possible second stalker. Thomas explained what he had observed in recent weeks. A figure moving through the woods near Emma's property, someone who seemed to be conducting surveillance but was much more skilled at remaining undetected. Can you describe this person? Officer Collins asked. Not really. I've only seen them from a distance and always at dusk or dawn when the light is poor. But they move differently than I do. More systematically. Like they have military or law enforcement training. Officer Collins and Emma exchanged concerned looks. Mr. Brennan, I'm going to need you to come down to the station and give a full statement about everything you've observed. Both your own activities and this possible second watcher. Thomas agreed and they left the diner together. Officer Collins arrested Thomas on charges of stalking and breaking and entering, but arranged for him to be released on his own recognizance after giving his statement. He seems genuinely remorseful, Officer Collins told Emma later, and his information about a second watcher is troubling. If he's telling the truth, we might be dealing with someone much more dangerous than Thomas. Emma felt exhausted. Just when she thought her nightmare was over, it seemed to be getting worse. That night, Emma stayed at her sister's house in town. She was too afraid to return to her cottage, especially knowing that someone else might still be watching it. Officer Collins arranged for surveillance of Emma's property, but after 3 days, they had seen no sign of the mysterious second watcher Thomas had described. Maybe he scared them off, Officer Collins suggested. If they knew Thomas was arrested, they might have decided it was too risky to continue watching your house. Emma wanted to believe that, but something felt wrong. If this second person was as professional as Thomas had suggested, would they really be so easily deterred? Against Officer Collins' advice, Emma decided to return to her cottage. She had a new security system installed, complete with infrared cameras and motion sensors that would detect anyone approaching her property from any direction. For the first week back home, everything seemed normal. No mysterious incidents, no signs of intrusion, no sense of being watched. Emma began to relax again. Then she found the photograph. This one was different from the picture Thomas had left. It was taken with a much better camera, and it showed Emma inside her house the previous evening. She was sitting on her couch reading a book, unaware that she was being photographed through her living room window. But what chilled Emma to the bone was not just the fact that someone had taken the picture. It was when the picture had been taken. The photograph showed Emma wearing the blue sweater she had worn to meet Thomas at the diner. But she had worn that sweater again just the night before, while sitting in her living room reading. This photograph had been taken after Thomas was arrested. The second watcher was real and he was still out there. Emma called Officer Collins immediately, and within an hour, her house was full of police officers processing the scene. They found boot prints in the woods behind her house, different from the ones Thomas had left. These were smaller, more precise, and made by someone who knew how to minimize their impact on the ground. Professional, Officer Collins confirmed grimly. Military or law enforcement background, just like Thomas suggested. Emma felt helpless. What do I do now? If this person is trained, how do we catch them? We bring in some help. Officer Collins contacted the state police, who sent a detective with experience in stalking cases. Detective Sarah Morgan was a woman in her 30s with short dark hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Tell me about your daily routine," Detective Morgan said during their first meeting. "Everything from when you wake up to when you go to bed." Emma described her typical day: waking at 6 a.m., shower, breakfast, leaving for work at 7:30, returning home around 4 p.m., dinner, evening activities, bed by 10 p.m. "Any variation in this routine?" "Sometimes I go grocery shopping after work. Sometimes I visit friends on weekends. But mostly it's pretty consistent." Detective Morgan nodded. "Consistent routines make you predictable, which makes you easier to watch. We need to change that." Over the next few days, Detective Morgan helped Emma develop a more varied routine. Different routes to work, different times for daily activities, unexpected trips to different locations. The goal was to make it difficult for anyone to predict where Emma would be at any given time. They also set up a more sophisticated surveillance operation around Emma's property. Unmarked police cars would patrol the area at random intervals. Motion sensors were placed throughout the woods surrounding her house. Detective Morgan even arranged for an undercover officer to pose as a new neighbor in the vacant house across the street. For 2 weeks, the plan seemed to work. There were no more photographs, no signs of intrusion, no evidence that anyone was watching Emma's house. Then Detective Morgan received a call that changed everything. "Emma, I need you to come to the station right away," she said. "We've identified your stalker." Emma hurried to the police station, where Detective Morgan was waiting with a thick file folder. "His name is Marcus Webb, former military, discharged 3 years ago. He's been linked to at least 6 stalking cases across 3 different states." Detective Morgan opened the file and showed Emma a photograph. The man in the picture was in his early 40s, with short brown hair and cold, calculating eyes. He targets single women living alone in rural areas. His pattern is always the same. He conducts surveillance for months, learning everything about his victim's routine and habits. Then he begins psychological harassment designed to isolate the victim and make them completely dependent on him for protection. Emma felt sick. Dependent how? He creates problems that only he can solve. Sometimes he'll sabotage the victim's car and then offer to help fix it. Sometimes he'll break into their house and then suggest they need better security. The goal is to insert himself into their life as their protector. But he hasn't done any of those things to me. That's because Thomas's presence complicated his usual pattern. He was waiting for Thomas to be removed from the equation before escalating his approach. Detective Morgan showed Emma several more photographs from the file. Pictures of Marcus Webb's previous victims, women who looked remarkably similar to Emma. Young, attractive, living alone in isolated areas. What happened to these other women? Detective Morgan's expression was grim. 2 of them moved away after extended harassment. One was hospitalized after a supposed accident that we believe Webb engineered. 2 others. Detective Morgan paused. 2 others were found dead in circumstances that looked like accidents but that we now suspect were murders. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. He's killed people? We think so, but we've never been able to prove it. He's very careful, very methodical. He makes everything look natural or accidental. How did you identify him? The boot prints behind your house matched prints from a crime scene in Oregon. Once we had his identity, everything else fell into place. Emma sat in stunned silence, trying to process the information. She wasn't just dealing with a stalker. She was being hunted by a serial killer. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We catch him. But we need your help to do it." Detective Morgan explained the plan. Emma would return to her normal routine, but with heavy police protection that Marcus Webb wouldn't be able to see. The goal was to lure him into making a move so they could arrest him. "He'll be expecting you to change your behavior now that Thomas has been caught," Detective Morgan explained. "If you suddenly start acting differently, he'll know something is up and he'll disappear. We need him to think you feel safe again." Emma was terrified, but she agreed to the plan. The alternative was to spend the rest of her life running from someone who had proven he could find his victims anywhere. For the next week, Emma followed her normal routine while surrounded by invisible protection. Undercover officers were positioned throughout her neighborhood. Electronic surveillance monitored every inch of her property. Detective Morgan herself was never more than 5 minutes away. On Friday evening, Emma was washing dishes in her kitchen when she saw a figure standing at the edge of her backyard. This time she didn't run or hide. Following Detective Morgan's instructions, she acted as if she hadn't seen anything. She finished washing the dishes, turned off the kitchen light, and went upstairs to her bedroom. Through her bedroom window, Emma could see the figure moving closer to her house. Her heart was pounding, but she forced herself to follow the plan. She changed into her pajamas, brushed her teeth, and got into bed, leaving her bedroom light on for exactly 10 minutes before turning it off. In the darkness, Emma lay still and listened. She could hear soft footsteps on her back porch, then the barely audible sound of someone testing her back door. Emma's hand found her cell phone under her pillow. She sent a pre-written text message to Detective Morgan. "He's here." The footsteps moved around to the side of her house. Emma heard the faint scraping sound of someone trying to open her window. Then she heard a new sound. Voices, very quiet, coming from her backyard. "Police, don't move. Get on the ground now." Emma heard running footsteps, shouts, and what sounded like a brief struggle. Then silence. Her phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morgan. "We got him. Stay inside until we give you the all clear." 20 minutes later, Detective Morgan knocked on Emma's front door. "It's over," she said simply. Emma opened the door to find her yard full of police cars and officers. Detective Morgan led her outside, where she saw Marcus Webb sitting in the back of a patrol car, his hands cuffed behind his back. He was smaller than Emma had expected, and older than his photograph. But when he looked at her through the car window, Emma saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. Not anger or fear, but a kind of calculating patience, as if being caught was just a temporary setback. "Don't let him get to you," Detective Morgan said, noticing Emma's reaction. "He wants you to be afraid. That's how he maintains power over his victims even after he's caught." "Will he go to prison?" "For a very long time. We found evidence in his car linking him to several other crimes. He won't be bothering you or anyone else again." But as the patrol car drove away with Marcus Webb in the back seat, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't really over. The way he had looked at her suggested that even from prison, he would find a way to continue his psychological games. In the weeks that followed, Emma tried to return to her normal life. Thomas Brennan was sentenced to probation and community service, and he kept his promise to stay away from her. Marcus Webb was held without bail while prosecutors built their case against him. Emma thought she was finally safe. Then the letters started arriving again. These weren't delivered to her mailbox. They appeared in various locations around town. Tucked under her windshield wiper at the grocery store. Slipped into her coat pocket at the library. Left on her desk at school. Each letter was brief and typed on a computer. "I'm still thinking about you. Prison is temporary. My feelings for you are permanent. You can't hide from me forever." Emma brought the letters to Detective Morgan, who was baffled. "He's in solitary confinement awaiting trial. He has no access to a computer, no way to send mail, no contact with the outside world except his attorney." "Then who's sending these?" Detective Morgan had the letters analyzed, but they revealed nothing. No fingerprints, no DNA, no identifying marks. The paper was standard copy paper available anywhere. The printer could have been any of hundreds of different models. "Maybe he had an accomplice," Detective Morgan suggested. "Someone on the outside helping him." But investigation revealed no evidence of any accomplices. Marcus Webb had always worked alone in his previous crimes. The letters continued to appear, sometimes daily, sometimes with gaps of several days between them. They began to include more specific details about Emma's activities. "I liked the blue dress you wore to dinner with your sister last night. You should be more careful when you're jogging alone in the morning. The new locks on your windows won't keep me out when I'm ready to come for you." Emma was living in constant fear again. She varied her routine, changed her appearance, even considered moving to a different state. But somehow, the letters always found her. One evening, Emma was at home watching television when she heard a soft knock at her front door. Through the peephole, she saw a woman she didn't recognize standing on her porch. Emma called through the door. "Who is it?" "My name is Jennifer Walsh. I think we need to talk." Emma opened the door cautiously, keeping the chain lock engaged. The woman on her porch was in her early 30s with long blonde hair and nervous eyes. I know who's been sending you those letters, Jennifer said. Emma removed the chain and opened the door fully. Come in. Jennifer sat on Emma's couch and looked around nervously. I was Marcus Webb's girlfriend for 2 years. Until recently, I didn't know what he really was. You were dating him? He's very charming when he wants to be. Very convincing. He told me he was a security consultant who traveled a lot for work. I never suspected that he was actually stalking women. Emma sat across from Jennifer. What do you know about the letters? Jennifer reached into her purse and pulled out a laptop computer. He asked me to hold on to this for him before he was arrested. Said it was important work files that he needed to keep safe. I thought I was just doing him a favor. Emma stared at the laptop. You've been sending the letters? Not me personally. But yes, this computer has been sending them automatically. Marcus set up some kind of program before he was arrested. It's been monitoring your social media accounts, your email, even traffic cameras around town. Whenever it detects that you've been somewhere or done something, it generates a new letter and prints it. Emma felt sick. How is that possible? I don't understand all the technical details, but Marcus was very good with computers. He had this whole system set up to track multiple women at the same time. The laptop has been running in my apartment for months, sending letters and emails to various printers around town. Various printers? He hacked into printers at businesses you frequent. The grocery store, the library, your school. The computer sends a letter to whichever printer is closest to wherever you are at the time. Emma's mind reeled. Even from prison, Marcus Webb had found a way to continue his psychological torture. Why are you telling me this now? Emma asked. Jennifer looked ashamed. Because I found the other files on his computer. Pictures of his previous victims. Details about what he did to them. I realized I was helping a monster. Jennifer opened the laptop and showed Emma the screen. It was filled with folders labeled with women's names. Emma recognized her own name among them. Each folder contains everything he learned about that person. Their daily routines, their fears, their weaknesses. He was planning to use all of this information against them. Emma saw folders for at least 20 different women. Are all of these his victims? Some are past victims. Some are current targets. And some... Jennifer paused. Some are women he plans to target in the future. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. He's still recruiting new victims from prison? The computer program is designed to identify potential targets based on their online activity. Single women living alone, posting about their daily activities on social media, checking in at locations that make them easy to track. Emma immediately called Detective Morgan, who arrived within minutes. When she saw the laptop and understood what it represented, her expression became grimmer than Emma had ever seen it. This changes everything, Detective Morgan said. If he's been using automated systems to stalk multiple women simultaneously, we need to warn all of his potential victims immediately. Jennifer helped Detective Morgan and the FBI Cybercrimes Unit analyze the laptop's contents. What they found was horrifying in its scope and sophistication. Marcus Webb had created an entire network of surveillance and harassment tools. The laptop was connected to dozens of hacked security cameras around multiple towns. It monitored social media accounts, email addresses, and online shopping patterns. It had detailed psychological profiles of over 50 women, complete with plans for how to approach and manipulate each one. He's been building this system for years, the FBI analyst explained to Emma. It's like a stalking operation run by artificial intelligence. Most disturbing of all, the system was designed to continue operating indefinitely, even if Marcus Webb died in prison. It would keep identifying new targets, monitoring their activities, and escalating its harassment tactics according to pre-programmed patterns. We need to shut this down immediately, Detective Morgan said. And we need to notify every woman in his target database. The FBI worked around the clock to dismantle Marcus Webb's digital stalking network. They traced connections to hacked systems across multiple states and found evidence linking Webb to dozens of unsolved harassment cases. Emma watched the news coverage with a mixture of relief and horror. Relief that the nightmare was finally ending, but horror at the scope of what Marcus Webb had been planning. The good news, Detective Morgan told her, is that with this evidence, Marcus Webb will never see the outside of a prison cell again. The bad news is that some of his automated systems may still be running on computers we haven't found yet. Emma decided it was time to leave Millbrook. She had lived in fear for too long, and even though Marcus Webb was in prison and his network was being dismantled, she couldn't shake the feeling that she would never be completely safe there. She put her cottage up for sale and accepted a teaching position in a different state. Before leaving, she visited Thomas Brennan, who was working at a tree nursery as part of his community service. "I wanted to thank you," she told him. Thomas looked surprised. "Thank me? For what?" "If you hadn't been watching me, you never would have noticed Marcus Webb. You probably saved my life." Thomas looked uncomfortable. "I still shouldn't have been stalking you. What I did was wrong regardless of how it turned out." "You're right. It was wrong. But you also showed genuine remorse and tried to make things right. That means something." Emma left Millbrook on a bright Tuesday morning in November. As she drove away from her cottage for the last time, she looked in her rearview mirror at the woods where two different men had spent months watching her every move. She thought about how easy it had been for them to invade her privacy, to turn her safe haven into a place of fear and anxiety. She thought about the dozens of other women in Marcus Webb's files who might be going through the same ordeal she had experienced. But she also thought about Jennifer Walsh, who had found the courage to come forward despite her own fear and shame. And she thought about Detective Morgan and Officer Collins, who had worked tirelessly to protect her and bring her stalkers to justice. Emma's new home was in a small city with good neighbors and well-lit streets. She had learned to be more cautious about her online presence and more aware of her surroundings, but she refused to live in fear. 6 months after leaving Millbrook, Emma received a call from Detective Morgan. "I wanted to let you know that Marcus Webb was found dead in his cell this morning," she said. "Apparent suicide." Emma felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that he could never hurt anyone again, but also a strange sadness that his life had ended in such a way. What about his computer network? "We found and shut down the last of his automated systems 2 weeks ago. It's really over this time, Emma." Emma hung up the phone and looked out the window of her new home. Children were playing in the park across the street. A couple was walking their dog along the sidewalk. Normal people living normal lives, unaware of the digital predators who might be watching them from afar. She thought about the folder with her name on Marcus Webb's computer, filled with intimate details about her life that she had never chosen to share. She thought about the months of fear and paranoia, the constant feeling of being watched and judged. But she also thought about her new life, her new friends, her new sense of security. She had survived something that many people never recover from, and she was stronger because of it. That evening, Emma received a text message from an unknown number. "I know where you live now." For a moment, her blood ran cold. Then she realized the message was followed by a laughing emoji and another text. "Sorry, wrong number. Meant to send that to my brother as a joke." Emma laughed, surprised by her own reaction. A few months ago, a message like that would have sent her into a panic. Now she could recognize it for what it was, a harmless mistake. She had learned to trust her instincts again, to distinguish between real threats and imagined ones. She had reclaimed her life from the men who had tried to control it through fear and surveillance. The watcher in the woods was gone. Emma was finally free.